Okay, like I said, my name is Obi Nemeka, and I'll be the one taking us on this particular course, ethics. And my goal for this course is to make sure that we all appreciate the course called ethics, because ethics is 15 to 20% of the CFA Level 1 exam. So it's a particular course you will not like to joke with. So if it's 15 to 20%, what it means is that 15 to 20% of the questions you'll be answering in your Level 1 CFA exam will be coming from ethics. So you can imagine 15 to 20%. And if you check the whole other courses we have, you will notice that this actually has the highest percentage. So it's a course you wouldn't want to joke with. And one thing again you need to note about ethics is that, so from your Level 1 to your Level 3, ethics is basically like almost the same thing. So in Level 2 and Level 3, they might be doing just small addition to it, but basically it's the same thing. So I used to tell students that if you master ethics in Level 1, it's going to guide you in your Level 2 and your Level 3. And you also notice that in Level 2 and Level 3, ethics also has a high percentage. Okay, so this is a course that I would really want you to pay attention if you want to pass. I believe all of us want to pass. I hope you want to pass.
Of course.
Yeah, so I would like you to really pay attention to this course. It's not really much. My goal is to, guide us in such a way that if you follow through what I'm going to teach you, it should make your ethics work easy. Okay. So as I normally do in my classes, if you have any question as we proceed, you can always go ahead to ask. And if you also have any contribution you believe can also help the class, your goal is also to ask that question so that, or make that contribution so that every other person can participate. Okay, so this is our structure. So ethics basically has 5 topics only for Level 1. So we'll just follow it sequentially as it is in the curriculum. Okay, I think the last topic has to do with application of the guidance, so we can actually bring that one forward and teach it before we talk about keeps and whatever. Okay, so it has about 5 topics, and our goal is to take a look at each of these topics. There is a particular topic in ethics that they call guidance. So that guidance is actually where we are going to spend most of the time in. Okay, so and also that's where like 80 to 90% of the exam questions will be coming out from. Okay, so by the time we get there, we are going to spend more time on it. Okay, so this is the first topic we have in ethics, and let's try to see what this topic has to teach us. So the topic says ethics and trust in the investment profession. So basically, before we go in, I would like to summarize what this course is trying to say. So in this course, we're going to try to define ethics, know what ethics actually means, and we also see how trust creates ethics. So how, if we have, when the participants in the capital market or investors or clients can trust us, how it can actually help the investment profession. And we are going to learn that if we are ethical or we act ethical, the clients and the investment profession or the investment market or whatever, they can actually trust us, and that can actually help the market. Okay, so let's give a little illustration before we start. So let's say you are working in a particular investment bank, or you're a research analyst. Okay, so just because of the fact that you wanted to please your employer, or you want to also please your colleagues in the office, or maybe you just want to find favor in the sight of whoever you want to find favor, you decided to issue a research report. And the research report you issued is misleading. Okay, now, this research report, clients used it to invest in a security normally they are not meant to invest in. Now, if you do that, you can actually gain that favor in the sight of your employer and also your colleagues. But the problem associated with this is that in the long run, that can actually affect the investment profession, because the clients that invested based on that faulty research can lose money. And if they lose money, they can lose trust in you. And if they can lose trust in you, you can lose their business. And they can even lose trust in the investment profession as a whole. So that's actually the bedrock of this particular learning. I hope we're together. Can everyone hear me clearly?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, good. So let's start with the definition of ethics. So from here, we can see that ethics comes from a Greek word, ethos, okay? And basically what that Greek word means is character. So ethics comes from a Greek word, ethos, which means character. And from basically what we have been talking about, you will get to know that ethics encompasses a set of moral principles. And these moral principles are what is going to guide our behavior. Okay. So the moral principle guides how we behave. And the way we behave, it's now what is going to actually either improve the outcomes of the shareholders or stakeholders or impact it in a negative way. So we know that we have shareholders. So your shareholders can be your clients, it can be your investors, it can be your employers, it can be the general public as a whole. All these are stakeholders, okay? And each of these stakeholders would be affected by the decision you make. So it can be a positive decision that you make. It can also be a negative decision that you make. So in that example I gave us, it's a case of negative decision. So someone issues a research that they know that this research is not, is not reflective of what they believe or what's based on fundamentals they are meant to issue. Now, by the time they issue, the clients made investment decision based on their recommendation, and client lost money. Okay? So you can notice that this one is affecting the stakeholders, which are the clients in this regard. So it's not actually a good one. So in these principles, we are going to see things that are good, things that are acceptable, and things that are obligatory. Okay. So if you do, if you take actions that are good, actions that are acceptable, it's going to positively impact your clients or your investors. On the other hand, we are also going to see things that are considered bad or behaviors that are considered unacceptable and also behaviors that are considered forbidden. Okay, so in ethical principles, these are like two sets of behaviors that you see. Okay, so like we said, behaviors that are good, acceptable, and obligatory would actually improve the outcomes of your, clients or the stakeholders, while behaviors that are bad, unacceptable, and forbidden will negatively impact your clients or stakeholders. Okay, so there are some of the widely acknowledged ethical principles we know. So if I say honesty, I believe everyone knows what it means to be honest. If I say transparency, I believe everyone knows what that is. Fairness, diligence, and also respect for the right of others. So these are all widely acknowledged ethical principles. Okay. Now, we used to say that, or noted in the curriculum, is that ethical conduct will balance your self-interest with both the direct and indirect consequences of the behavior on others. So let me say this. So obviously, you as a person have your own self-interest, and also your clients or the other stakeholders also have their own self-interest, right? So now the goal is this. There are certain actions that you are going to do, and some of these actions you are trying to benefit your own self, but that action can actually have a consequences on the others. Okay. So now the goal is to think. So this action I'm going to take, yeah, I'm trying to, probably do this because I want my employer to be pleased, right? But how does this action I'm going to do, how does it impact, or what are the consequences, both direct and indirect consequences? So what are the consequences this my action? What would they have on the other stakeholders involved? So whichever action you want to take, the goal is to consider not only your self-interest, but how that your action would, affect the other stakeholders. So, by the time you have this thought process, it's going to help you to, act ethically. Okay. So, in summary, we can say that ethical actions are those actions that are perceived to be beneficial and conforming to societal ethical expectations. So that is actually how we are going to, make that particular summary. I hope we're together. Is there any question on what we have discussed so far? Like I said, the ethical actions are those that are perceived as beneficial and conforming to society. Okay, so any action that would, improve the outcomes on the stakeholders involved, we are going to consider that action an ethical action.
But sometimes the
Now let's talk about
society is wrong. The
yes,
the
yes, yes.
expectation of the
Okay.
society is wrong.
Yes, 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 yes. So in this particular case, if I actually love that observation, yes, sometimes the expectations of the society are wrong, okay? Because this thing that happens whereby people are, doing, let's say people following the crowd, right?
Mm-mm.
So there are sometimes people will keep on doing a bad thing to the extent that bad thing now feels good. In fact, this thing you said just reminded me something. There was a case where, so I had this, there's this lady, she's my friend. So she was telling me about her sister. So her sister, I think, got promoted in one of these parastatals or commissions or whatever. She said, they actually give her a kind of check or something to sign out a huge amount of money from the office. And she was like, she can't sign up this money. That why would she sign up this money? Because she knows that it's actually a kind of illegal thing they want to do, and it's very wrong. So she now said, after resisting to sign up, before they replaced her with another person that will sign off the money, right? So funny enough, I was telling someone this story. Look at what happened to my friend's sister. The man was like, why didn't she sign off the money? It's a normal thing. Everybody knows that these are normal things that are happening in offices now, in all these kind of offices now. It's not really like as if it's a big deal. Like I was looking at this man like, are you serious? It's a normal thing that these are things that go on. So yes, like he said, sometimes the crowd can be wrong. Okay. So even if we are going to apply that principle or what they say, we also need to also evaluate that the society is actually that whatever they believe is also right. That is why we said that ethics encompasses a set of moral principles. So even when we are looking at the societal expectation, we still have to filter it in that lens of moral principles. I hope that's clear.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, good. Now, the government sometimes also, come up. So we have governments and some other regulatory organizations. They also come up with laws and regulations. So the goals of these laws and regulations are actually to reflect or bring out all the shared beliefs so that everyone can adhere to those beliefs. Okay, so we see that laws tend to specify conduct and regulations that can actually guide the behavior of the citizens or the behavior of the impacted parties in a specific situations. Okay, so when we look at laws and regulation, especially as pertain to investment professionals, you will notice that some laws and regulations will come up with, some standards. So some of them might be suitability standards. Some of them might also be fiduciary standards. Okay. So let's distinguish between those two. Okay. So if we have a law that focuses on suitability standards, basically what the law is saying is that the investment professional has to recommend securities that are suitable to their clients. So you don't just recommend any kind of security to your clients. The security you are to recommend has to be suitable to your clients. Okay. Then some other laws would also come up with fiduciary standards. Okay. So fiduciary standards is basically okay. All right, so let's continue. So before I was saying that sometimes the laws and regulation would actually have, suitability and fiduciary standard. So I said, if there is a suitability standard, basically, what the law requires from you is that you only recommend securities that are suitable to your clients. Then on the other side, if there are fiduciary standards, the laws and regulation requires that you should act in the best interest of your clients. In fact, you will notice that when we are going to be discussing about some of these standards, you have to act in the best interest of your clients above your own interest and also above your employer's interest. Okay, so you will notice that different laws and regulations. So there are variations. So you notice that when you come to Nigeria, we have different laws and regulation here. When you go to America, there are also different laws and regulations. So these differences tend to reflect variations in the beliefs and values of different people that live within those jurisdictions. Now, there is something we are going to discuss. So we are going to look at something called the Code of Ethics, and then something called the Standards of Conduct or Standards of Professional Conduct. So you will notice that certain communities or certain groups, they will come together and codify their beliefs into something called Code of Ethics. Okay. So by the time this statement they mean codify is like to write down different statements about what they believe are ethical, and that all the group members or the members of the committee are required to come together and adhere to this written code of ethics. So when you go to the legal profession, you will notice that they have their own code of ethics. When you come to what do they call it? You are going to notice that CFA Institute has their own code of ethics. Different professions in the world have different code of ethics that the members actually adhere to. Okay, so basically, we'll say that the code serves as a general guide for the members' behavior. Now, some of the groups or communities would go further. Just from the code of ethics, they are going to adopt a explicit rule or standard. Okay, so this explicit rule or standard, it's now what is going to identify the specific behavior that is required of the members of the communities. Okay, and this explicit rule or standard is what we call standards of conduct or standards of professional conduct. And we say that they actually, serve as a benchmark for the minimally acceptable behavior of community members. So when we are going to properly study Code of Ethics and Standards of Professional Conduct for CFA, you will notice that they actually have both of them. Okay, so the Code of Ethics would be like broad statements. So you will notice that there are about 6 of them in our case. Okay, they are broad statements. But the standard is now what tells you the things that are required of you in order to meet that Code of Ethics. So the standard tells you what are required, the individual things or details that are required of you in order to meet that Code of Ethics. So basically, the exam, mainly what you are going to be tested in is the standards. Okay, so we say that these standards help to clarify the Code of Ethics. I hope we're together.
Yeah.
All right, good. So sometimes people or members of the community or the group, maybe you might see someone would violate the code of ethics and or the code of standards of professional conduct. And we are going to learn from these our ethics at the CFA Institute. They don't actually joke with this. They don't joke with this. They don't joke with violation of their code of ethics or violation of the standards of conduct. And the reason is that if someone or a member of the community violates this code of ethics and standards, it can actually harm the reputation of the community internally and externally. Okay, so imagine in a case whereby certain groups are violating the code of ethics while some are not violating. So the people violating, the people not violating will not really be happy with those violating. So it can actually create a kind of reduced trust among community members. Externally also, it can, create external reduced trust between the community and the general public. So one of the things that makes people to hold the CFA certification in high esteem, among many other things, are the CFA Institute Code of Ethics. Okay, so if an employer is employing you, they will believe that you are going to act ethically. We are going to learn that you are recommended to give your employer, your code of ethics and your standards of professional conduct, so that they will know it's actually a recommendation. So when we start talking about the guidance, we will talk about some of those kind of things. So because of these, reputational damage that can come from violations, we notice that community members tend to, kind of discipline people that violate their code of ethics and standards of professional conduct. So if there is a violation, it can trigger an investigation, it can trigger corrective action, potential discipline. In some situations, it can even trigger expulsion of the violator from the community or from the group. So these are some of the things that happens when there is a violation. All right, so to make sure that we are following, I would like us to answer this question. So these are some of the questions I lifted from the curriculum to help us to, articulate and have a proper comprehension on this. All right, so what should be the answer for number one?
That would be C.
Okay, someone says C. I hope everybody's in agreement. Okay, C is correct. What about number two?
Well, C.
Okay. C is also correct. So we said that the standards of conduct serves as a benchmark for minimally acceptable behavior. Okay. So we are good with this. Is there any question so far on what we have discussed? Is there any question?
No, I
So
think we're
remember,
good.
okay, good. So remember, the goal is for you to comprehend. So my mission here is for you to comprehend and make sure you really understand. Like I said, ethics forms 15 to 20% of your exam. So if you can actually get everything in ethics, I believe you are almost on your way to success. So don't joke with it. Spend a whole lot of time for ethics, especially for level one, because if you master it very well in level one, by the time you get to level two, you can even be solving your ethics question without even reading. Okay. So master it now, spend some time and then master it. All right, so now we are going to look at the next topic, so which is ethics and professionalism. Ethics and professionalism. Okay, so we are going to start off by defining what a profession is. Okay, so professions are occupational communities with specific education, expert knowledge, and a framework of practice. So this is the simplest way we are going to define profession. So professions are occupational communities with specific education, expert knowledge, and a framework of practice. Okay, so we know about the different professions we have in the world. So we have the legal profession, we have the what do they call them? You see the finance profession and many other professions you can actually think of. There are plenty of them in the world. Okay, so you will notice that one of the key things or the key things profession emphasizes are code of ethics. Okay, so that is one. Another one is commitment to service, and another one is empathy with their clients. So typically, whenever you see any profession, just watch. You will see a code of ethics. So accounting profession is there. You will notice that accountants have their own ethics. So if you have written ACC or all those things, you will notice that they have their own ethics. Okay. Then again, you see commitment to service. Okay. So professions are there to serve their clients and to act in the best interest of their clients. So these are like key things you notice about profession. Now, there are specialized professions. You notice that these specialized professions, before you operate in them, you have to have a license status, okay, in many countries. So like in Nigeria here, if you want to become a medical doctor, you have to be licensed. If you want to be a pharmacist, you'll have to be licensed. So there are some specialized professions that for you to operate in them, you must actually be licensed. Now, professions distinguish themselves from craft rights and trade bodies by upholding ethical standards. So we have actually stressed this enough. So a code of ethics is one of the major things that distinguishes professions from any other kind of association that you can actually think of. Okay, so and you will notice that their code of ethics communicates to others the shared principles of that profession. So the CFA Code of Ethics communicates to any other person and also even the CFA Institute members and candidates the shared principles of CFA Institute as a body. And it also communicates the expected behaviors of the professional members. So if I go to my employer and tell him this is my code of ethics and this is what the code of ethics is all about, the employer would actually know some of the expected behaviors or some things that they are expecting from me. So that if I do certain things or things that they don't expect from me, they might know that you are violating a certain code of ethics or a standard of professional conduct. Okay. So I remember one of my friend then. So he said he went for an interview. So during the interview, he said that it happened that I think the CFO of the firm that he went for the interview is also writing the CFA exam. I think he's writing level 2, and my friend just passed level 1. So before you know, the interview now changed from just discussing what do they call it? Discussing the interview requirements and whatever. So now discussing about the CFA exam. They now started talking about the ethics. I heard that the ethics says this. I heard that the ethics says that. And, according to my friend, the interview now just became a fun discussion of the CFA Institute and also the CFA Institute Code of Ethics and Standards. So when we start dealing with the standards and the Code of Ethics properly, you are going to see some of the things. Some of them might seem funny. Some of them can also seem interesting that you are required, and some of the things that you are not required to do. So we are going to talk about some of those principles. So what I'm trying to say is this: so your code of ethics typically communicates your shared principles and also the expected behaviors of a professional members. Now, the next thing we are required to learn is how professions establish trust. So there are many ways professions establish trust. Remember, we said trust is very, very important, especially for investment professions because of the nature of the business investment professions do. So unlike your normal corporations, investment professions deal with clients. And clients are not just customers. Clients are people that most at times they will have to come for your advice, okay, in order to manage their investments or fund, or sometimes they will even leave their assets for you to manage on their behalf. So they expect to trust you that you are going to manage these assets properly, and also that the advice you are going to give them, it's going to be an informed advice because they expect that you have a specialized knowledge in whatever you do. Okay, so to establish this trust, which fosters a good business relationship with your clients, there are certain things that you are expected to do. Okay, so first of all, professions establish trust through normalized practitioner behavior. Okay, through normalized practitioner behavior. So the normalized practitioner behavior is going to come from your codes and your standards. So that is why professional bodies develop code and standards. And the goal of the code and standards is to normalize the behavior of the members of that profession so that we can say If you're a CFA charter holder, there are certain behaviors we expect from you. If you are a legal practitioner in Nigeria, there are certain behaviors we expect from you. If you're a doctor operating in Nigeria, there are certain behaviors that you expect from you. Okay, so this normalized behavior actually that comes from the code and standards helps the profession to establish trust. Another way they establish trust is to provide service to the society. Okay, so the goal is actually to serve, and if people perceive that you are here for service, it can actually foster trust. So your goal is not just what you are going to make from your clients, or what you are going to make for yourself. The goal is how are you going to serve, and we know that when you serve, there are some benefits that you are going to get from service. Okay, so that is also another way the professions establish trust. Another way is focusing on their clients. Okay, in fact, acting in the best interest of their clients. So we expect you to act in the best interest of your clients. When we read the CFA Code of Ethics and Standards, you will notice that the CFA Institute expects you to even place your client's interest above your own interest. Okay, so there are certain times that there may be a fiduciary duty, and we have said if there is a fiduciary duty, that means you are expected to, act with a high standard of care when you are acting for the benefit of another party, which can be your clients in this particular case. And doing that can actually help establish trust. Then again, you will notice that professions tend to have high entry standards, okay? And that signals commitment to delivering high quality service. So I don't need to tell you right now that CFA Institute is one of those professions that have that, high entry standards. So before you become a charter holder, you are required to pass the level 1, the level 2, and the level 3 CFA exam. So you have to actually pass these 3 levels before you become a charter holder. And I believe you know that that thing will take a while. It will actually take a while. And you are required to, learn many things in that level, right? So we already know the different topics that you are required to go through. So by the time you survive these, what do they call it? This rigorous exam practice and whatever, I believe, you should actually know what you are doing. Someone called me this morning, a student called me this morning and said something. He said, now that he's now respecting the people that are charter holders. That's what he called me this morning to tell me, that he's now respecting charter holders. That it's not as if he doesn't value the CFA exam even before writing, that he actually valued the exam, but he didn't know that the exam is actually, like this till he now enrolled to become a candidate. That there are many things to learn, this and that. That in fact, and this is just level 1. He has now a healthy respect for charter holders. So the goal of entry standards is not really, high entry standards is not really to punish you, but to really give you that drill that can make you someone of character and also someone that can deliver once you pass through the process. And professions tend to possess a body of expert knowledge developed by experienced practitioners. So you notice we have something we call the CFA curriculum. And this CFA curriculum are developed by experts in their fields. So if you open the CFA curriculum, you'll be seeing names for each of the course or topic. You'll be seeing the different names of people that developed it, PhD, this, and these are people coming from prestigious universities, people working in prestigious investment firms, and whatever you have. So we have experts coming to develop this curriculum, and that curriculum every year they keep on updating it to make sure that whatever we have on it is relevant. So these are some of the things that you see professions keep on doing to make sure that they can have this trust with their clients. Another thing is that they encourage and facilitate continuing education. So even when you are done with your CFA exam, you are still required to keep on learning and learning and learning and upgrading your skills, because over time we notice that the investment world keeps on changing. New investment products and services keeps up popping up here and there. Okay. And your commitment to keep on learning and keep on growing can also help to establish trust. In fact, if I check, I remember the other day CFA Institute sent me a message, telling me some of the charter holders were requesting for some, learnings or whatever, because there are some things they added that wasn't there before. Okay. There are some of the things they added for you guys, like financial modeling. I know that they added financial modeling now, and one other thing like that. I think is it big data or whatever. So those things weren't really there when we were doing our own CFA exam, but they added those things there, and then the curriculum keeps on changing, and they expect that if you're a member, you also need to keep on improving your knowledge so that you can stay relevant with whatever is currently happening in the investment world. Okay. Then also, professions monitor the professional conduct and hold members accountable. So that comes by the concept of self-regulation. Okay, so CFA Institute, they keep on monitoring their members. In fact, they will say that they even monitor your social media and all those things that you have. And then if there is violation of any of their codes and standards, then you will notice that a sanction can come in. Okay. Then we said that professions are collegial. So basically, what that means is that they promote respect among professions, even in competition. So even when you are, working in a competitive environment with different firms competing for clients' business, there is still that need or requirement to respect other members of the profession. Professions are also recognized oversight bodies, and sometimes they play a role in monitoring and ensuring competence. And the final one we have is that professions do encourage engagement of members through volunteering, mentorship, and knowledge sharing. So I think that knowledge sharing part of it is also something very good, because you know that when you teach, you also learn more. Now, once you become a charter holder, there are some volunteering opportunities available to you that you can actually key into if you are interested. So we are going to talk about some of them. Like they have something they call the disciplinary review committee. They have something they call the standard of practice council. So there are some of these, volunteering opportunities that are open up for you as a charter holder that you can actually join in order to, also help yourself and also be like your contribution to the community. I hope we're together. Is there any question so far on what we have discussed?
We are good.
All right. Okay, let's talk about the professionalism in the investment industry. Professionalism in the investment industry. So first of all, we need to note that the investment management is actually a relatively young profession. Okay. Yes, it's actually, unlike most of these other established professions in the world, the investment profession, management profession is actually a relatively young one. Okay, so that is one of the things that you need to know. And there is a key thing noted. Now, not everyone engaged in the investment management is a professional. Okay, so this is actually key. So not everyone engaged in the investment management industry is a professional. So what does this mean? So this simply means that some professional or some practitioners have not actually undertaken any specific investment training. Okay, and some of them are not also a member of a professionally recognized body. So because of this, it does create a challenge for the profession to gain trust. So because you will notice that not all the whole members are required to adhere to a specific ethical standard. So some people might actually act unethically, and that can actually create a challenge for gaining trust. Okay, but currently, the investment management is becoming increasingly global. Okay, and professionals are starting to seek cross-border opportunities. There are some candidates that are writing CFA exam, not just because of anything, they just want to use it to travel to Canada or travel to another country to go use it to work there, right? Yeah, so you will notice that because of this increasing global nature, people are seeking cross-border opportunities, and because of that, the investment profession is actually, growing and becoming better than it used to be. Now, we have noted this before, and we have said that trust is very, very, very important in the investment industry because of the nature of the business that investors do with their clients. Okay, so because of the nature of business, trust is actually very, very important. Okay, and we have said before that your clients expect you to have superior financial expertise. Okay, they expect you to have superior financial expertise, technical knowledge, and also knowledge of the applicable laws. Okay, and how does the investment management industry build trust? Basically, there are many ways, but two major ways noted in the curriculum. One is that the investment management profession and the investment firms must be interdependent. So this is one way. Okay, so the investment management profession and the investment firms has to be interdependent. So they have to actually depend on each other, and that dependence can actually foster trust. Another way is that the investment industry has to comply with code of ethics and professional standards. So doing these two things can actually help the investment industry to build up trust, which is actually essential. And you will notice that if the investment industry actually builds trust, it's actually good for everybody. So all the whole stakeholders will benefit. So for clients can actually come and invest their money knowing that the investment management or managers will act in their best interest. And that would actually bring more money into the investment industry. And more money will mean more employment in the investment industry, which will actually mean more revenue for the companies, which will actually mean lesser costs, and which will actually mean that the society as a whole would actually benefit. So it will actually benefit everyone if the investment industry acts ethically and also are interdependent. So there is this interdependence between these two parties that we have mentioned. I hope we're still together. Does anyone have any question on what we have discussed so far? Does anyone have any question, any contribution, any comment?
We're good.
We are good. All right, good. So, okay, so please, like I said earlier on, I keep on hammering this. I want you all to not just, the goal is not just to learn ethics. The goal is to master ethics. The goal is not just to learn ethics. The goal is to master ethics. I have told you why. Let me repeat again. One of the major reasons is that ethics is 15 to 20% of your level one exam. The second reason is ethics is basically the same level one, level two, and level three. So take this time and master it and do extremely well. Don't joke with it in your exam. Don't procrastinate your reading. Okay. So from what we have done so far, you will notice that the course is actually simple. Now let's talk about the CFA Institute and the investment management. Okay, CFA Institute and investment. So we know that the CFA Institute is the largest body for investment management profession. So this is the largest body. Okay. So we know it's a very global profession. So whenever we mention CFA Institute, I believe that people that work in the investment industry on average actually knows what it means. Okay. Now the CFA Institute has a mission to lead the investment profession, and they hope to do this by promoting high ethical standards, also high quality education, and also professional excellence. So what the CFA Institute does is this. So they gather knowledge from investment professionals. So this curriculum you see is written by many professions, okay, or many professionals in the industry. So they gather their knowledge, then they conduct rigorous exam. So we have talked about the exam, level 1, level 2, and level 3. So you have to really pass these 3 levels of exam in order to become a charter holder. Okay. And then we know how rigorous the exam is. So basically, one day exam, one day exam. So those days when we were writing our own exam, the questions were much compared to what it is right now. They have actually reduced the number of exams. I remember those days we really need to even travel outside Nigeria to go and write our own exam. So you guys are enjoying it right now. So you can just go to Lagos or come to Abuja here to write your own exam. But in our days, we really needed to travel, go and lodge in a hotel, and then it used to be like we would do. So it's 6 hours then. So we'll do like 3 hours in the morning. We'll go for a break. We'll come back and do 3 hours in the afternoon. So by the time you finish doing that 3 hours, in fact, your body will know that you really went for an exam. Your body will really know that you went for an exam. Okay. So even still now, in as much as they have still reduced the questions, it's still rigorous. I used to say that for me, the CFA exam is not difficult. And if you ever have thought that this exam is difficult, my goal is to crush that mindset. This exam is not difficult. I believe that we have done many courses on the exam. And if you are truthful, you will agree with me that the exam is not difficult. So the only thing is that the curriculum is fast. There are many things to learn. And if you don't have a systemic way of learning this curriculum, there are some things that would escape, right? So maybe you are reading this particular topic and, by the time you now come back to something you have read before, maybe you have forgotten some of the formulas or forgotten some of the concepts. So the material is bulky. That is the only thing that we can say. And if you have a proper strategy for learning and studying this material, you will notice that you can actually maximize your time in your studies, and then you can actually pass this exam. Not just passing, because the goal is not, remember, there is no pass mark in this exam. So it's based on the performance and the CFA Board of Governors that will come and set the minimum passing score. So your goal is not just to say that you are targeting 5th, targeting 7th. No, the goal is to become the best. Like become the best. You read. I know that most of us are working. So when you are working, you have family, and you probably also have some other commitments outside the CFA exam, and it might actually be overwhelming, okay? But you need to come up with a system that can actually help you to pass. So passing the CFA exam is not a trial and error process whereby you say, let me try. No, you have to come up with a strategy. You have to come up with a strategy. And one of the strategies we normally recommend is the strategy of one, consistency. Consistency. So you have to make reading or studying like a daily habit. It's not this kind of reading that you study today and probably after 3 days you now open the book again. That kind of reading wouldn't really make sense for this program. When you are writing something like ICANN, ACC, and some of these other exams whereby you can only write one paper at a time. So let me say if I'm writing ACC now, where I can write only one paper at a time, I can actually decide to spend my whole time. So let's say 1 week or 2 weeks to the exam, I can take leave from the office and use that leave and spend the whole time reading that course, and I'll pass. I can actually do that kind of crash program and it's work. But it doesn't really work so much in the CFA exam because of the bulkiness of the curriculum. Okay. So apart from tutoring CFA candidates, I also tutor people how to learn. And one of the things that we know when it comes to effective learning is the way your brain processes information. So it's better for you to read 1 hour every day, 7 days a week, than for you to come one day and read 7 hours. So there is something we call forgetting curve. If you read that 7 hours, you might think that you read. Yes, you read, but we know that you can never be effective throughout that 7 hours because of the law of diminishing returns. So over time, your comprehension level will drop. And there is something we call forgetting curve. Even after reading that 7 hours, after some days, some of those things that you have read, you will just start forgetting them if you don't go back to reinforce what you have read. Okay, so you have to come up with a spacing on how you read. And the second other way is solving questions, repetition. You keep on doing it, keep on solving questions, keep on solving questions. One of the recommendations is that you might have a certain number of questions you do every day. And the more you keep on doing it, it will be difficult for you to forget some of these concepts that we are discussing. So the final thing I have for here is, so if you are a charter holder, you are a candidate, you are required to adhere to the CFA Institute Code of Ethics and Standards of Professional Conduct. I hope we are together. I hope we're together. Okay, good. So let's okay, good. Okay, so let's attempt this question. What's the answer to number 1?
C.
Okay, someone says C. Does everyone agree with that?
Yes, C is fine.
Okay, someone else says C. Okay. Yes, so the correct answer to number 1 is B. Okay. The reason being this. So it says profession requires compliance with Code of Ethics. We have actually drummed this and drummed this and drummed this, which is actually correct. But the question says, the question is looking for the most accurate. So sometimes when you are answering CFA exam questions, watch the question sometimes to see what they are saying. They said most accurate. That means that some of the things in the questions are actually going to be accurate, but they are interested in the most accurate. So investment professionals have a special responsibility to act ethically because, B is the answer, because they are entrusted to protect clients' assets. Not because they are not, so C says because the profession requires compliance with the ethics. Not necessarily, that's correct, but the major thing is because of their relationship with their clients. I hope it's clear.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Number 2.
A.
Yes, A is actually perfect. Yeah, so yes, professionals use their specialized knowledge in service of others. Yes, perfect. Number 3.
I'll say A.
Okay, somebody said A. So the other person, who else? I actually want to know the people that are in this call. So we have okay, Ola is here.
Are we looking at question 3?
Yes. Balaji. Okay. Yes, question 3. Question 3.
I'll go with B.
Okay, somebody's going with B. Any other person? Any other person? Any other person? Okay, so in the absence of any other person, so the correct answer to this is C. Okay, so let's review. So the A says that a profession's code of ethics includes standards of conduct or specific It's not always compulsory. So some professions can just have their code of ethics. Standards, it's like a kind of build-up. So some professionals can now go the extra length coming up with standards of conduct, but it's not compulsory that once you have a code of ethics, you must have a standard of conduct. It's not compulsory. So, but you can choose now to go ahead and create a standard of, conduct. Also for B, it says a profession's code of ethics ensures that all members act ethically at all times. Not necessarily true. So the code of ethics is there to like guide the members. But we know that no matter, even if you want, give all the whole code of ethics and one and have, what do they call it? And have your whole sanctions on what you are going to do to people that violate the code of ethics. Some people will still violate the code of ethics. So it doesn't really ensure that, although it helps, but it doesn't, it's not a guarantee. Just like upon everything that they will still say, some people might still enter the, some people might still do certain things. They know that that thing is not ethical. So the C is correct because we said that it's the code of ethics communicates shared principles and expected behaviors. I hope we're together.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Now let's talk about the challenges to ethical conduct. Challenges to ethical conduct. So there are two major challenges to ethical conduct noted in the curriculum. So one of them is called overconfidence bias, and the other one is called situational influence. So let's start with the overconfidence bias. Okay? So overconfidence bias is simple. So people tend to act overconfident. So people tend to believe that they are more ethical than they are actually on the average. So people tend to believe that they are more ethical than they are on the average. And then we know that everyone cannot be above average. Okay, but people tend to actually believe. So if I ask in this class, how many people are ethical? I believe that more than 50% of us will raise our hands, but average is 50. Okay, so if you do this, you actually place much importance on internal traits or intrinsic motivation. Okay, so you see somebody who say that I'm an honest person, I will not lie. See somebody say I am this, I cannot steal, right? And the problem with this is this, sometimes people will tend to overestimate their own morality, especially when dealing with unfamiliar situation. So somebody says, I cannot steal, I cannot steal, I cannot steal, I can never steal. And that person now enters into an office where stealing is the norm, right? And probably they ask the person to write out a check or whatever, running in billions. And this person is going to collect some share from that. And probably the share is running in millions. And now the same person that is saying that I cannot steal is now thinking, Kai, so if they give me 100 million, this 100 million can solve many problems. He can do this. So that same person is now questioning what they actually said they can never do. Okay. So, they said that, just being this overconfidence or placing too much importance on internal threats and intrinsic motivation can actually result to, faulty decision making. Okay. So, the major thing that determines, so this overconfidence bias is not actually the major determinant of whether someone will act ethically or not in a given situation. So the major one is this situational influence. Okay, so this is actually, so people might fail to recognize that their external factors or the external environment can actually greatly shape their thinking, their decision making, and their behavior. Okay, so the culture where you are brought up or the environment where you grew up tends to really impact the way you behave. So there are certain places that people grow up and they are doing whatever people in those cultures do. Whether those things are ethical or non-ethical, they don't know. But because everybody is doing it, they believe that that is right. So someone noted when we started this lecture that, necessarily following the crowd or the group doesn't really mean that you are acting ethically, and which is correct. Because imagine if you were born in an environment where stealing is a normal thing, okay? In fact, stealing, they don't even call it stealing. They use certain kind of word that shows that you are a guy man or something, right? You're a sharp guy, you know. So you see someone steals, and that person will come up to boast about it. See, I moved this person in, and they are even making mouth about it as it's something to be encouraged, right? So your environment actually really, really shapes your behavior, your decision making, and the way you think. So this is actually like the major determinants of whether you will act ethically or not. Okay. So some of the situational influences noted in the curriculum are money, prestige, and loyalty. So we already know what money can do and money cannot do. People have done many things that they regret, not just because of anything. They actually, even when they wanted to do some of these things, it's not something they are proud of, but just because of the money involved, they go ahead to do it. Okay. You have also seen people doing certain other things just because of prestige. Just because of prestige, people will do some things that really they are not proud of, but because they want to gain prestige, they will do it. Loyalty, we know, is also another one. So it can be loyalty to colleagues. It can also be loyalty to employers. In fact, in the CFA curriculum, they noted that this loyalty thing is actually a very, very, extremely powerful situational influence, right? So people tend to, the way your colleagues behave in the office can actually, impact your thinking or influence you positively or negatively. Okay. So obviously, if you're working in an office whereby people are doing illegal, unethical things, there is high tendency that if you don't guide yourself very well, you might join them. So in that kind of case, you really have to guide yourself very well, not to join them. Okay. There are also some places that you are working in an office whereby the office people maintain high ethical standards. Before you know, even you also join, right? So behaviors of people around you, your colleagues, your employer, tend to, seriously influence you. We are creatures of habit, right? We are creatures of habit. Sometimes you just join a group or association. Before you know, you will start speaking some of the kind of language or slangs, or you start using the kind of words they use, even before you knowing it, right? Because we tend to be affected by what is happening in our environment. Okay. Then again, the problem with situational influences is that it makes you to shift focus from long term to immediate term. So, you now shift focus for what is going to be beneficial in the long term to what you are going to gain in the immediate term. And that creates ethical lapses and poor decisions. So, if you want to correct this, your goal should be to switch from the immediate benefit you are going to get from whatever action you are going to take to the long-term benefit. Okay. So this thing that I want to do, how is it going to benefit the stakeholders in the long term? So by the time you use this long-term lens to evaluate your actions, it will actually help you to make better decisions. Now, noted in the CFA curriculum is the issue of compliance programs and ethical culture. Okay, so you will notice that certain organizations might be compliance focused. Okay, and the problem with just focusing only on compliance or adherence to rules and regulation is that it can oversimplify decision making and lead to what they call check the box mentality. Okay, so some organizations we have, okay, so you are required to do this, required to do that, not required to do this. So they have these rules, do's and don'ts. Do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. So if I'm to follow these do's and don'ts, sometimes it can actually make us to prioritize on rules and regulation, and which might make us to overlook broad ethical considerations. So you see, sometimes an organization might set certain rules, but a peculiar situation might come up a peculiar situation can actually come up. And because of this, their overindulgence in rules and regulation, they might not really handle those situations properly. Okay. So, the thing is that compliance programs really can be designed to enhance the ethical culture, but sometimes it has its own limitations. Okay. So you notice that the employers or employees in a compliance culture will be focusing on what can I do rather than what should I do. Okay. So what can I do is focusing on what can I do based on the rules and regulation, or what should I do focuses on given these particular circumstances. Okay. Given this unique need of this particular client, what should I do to help the client? What should I do to help the client? So, that is the case of the compliance programs. Okay, so before we go on, let's also attempt this question. And please, if you have any question based on what we have discussed so far, I will also want you to go ahead to ask me. And if you also have any contribution based on what we have discussed so far, you are also free to share with the class. All right, so who has the answer for number one? Please feel free to share your answer. Once you have the answer, let us know. The goal in the class is it's better you are even talking about what you know. Nobody, let me tell you a short story. So I wrote the CISA exam, and when I was writing the CISA exam, it happened that when I made the decision to write the exam, it was almost close to the exam. In fact, the registration was close to ending. I just made a decision to write the exam. So then I have some friends that have already registered for this exam long time ago, and they have started preparing. Close to the exam, I came out and asked them a question where they were reading. There are plenty of them there reading. And I came and asked a question. Now, that question that I asked, for someone about to write the exam, that question doesn't really make sense. It's not expected of you to ask that kind of question close to the exam, right? So when I came and asked them the question, they were just laughing at me like, are you serious? You're asking this kind of question close to exam. Are you serious? Are you writing this exam with us? I said, I need to know. So, after the whole thing, by the time we wrote the exam, funny enough, I passed. And most of those people there didn't pass. Okay. So why am I telling this story? Sometimes if you are in class, try to participate. It doesn't really matter. This is an adult education. So nobody will force you to write the CFA exam. I believe most of us that chose to write this exam decided to write it because of the benefit we perceive that is going to, add to us. So if you're in class, try to participate. Sometimes, even if you fail a question, it doesn't matter. The goal is to pass it in the exam, right? So that's the goal. So always try to, participate. In fact, sometimes from what we know about the way the brain works, if you fail a question, chances of you failing it again will be highly diminished because at least now you know why you failed it. Okay. All right. So that being said, what's the answer to number one?
That being said, C.
That being said, I like that. Somebody sees them by word, and that C is actually correct. Okay. Great job. Okay. Number two.
I'll go with C.
Yes, C is also correct. C is also correct. Yes. So CC is actually correct. All right. So let's move to the next topic we have here. So the topic is about ethical and legal standards.
Sorry.
Okay. Someone wants to say something.
Excuse me before you go forward.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe about 2 slides back, right? You spoke about, I think it's the overconfidence bias, where you talk around, uh, where you think, before there was something around I think you spoke around you thinking your own ethical behavior is above average.
Hmm.
I think it's 2 slides before this. I wanted you to explain that statement. In the slide
Okay,
before, the slide came before.
that's overconfidence bias, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what we said in overconfidence bias is that people tend to, place too much confidence on their internal trends and their intrinsic motivation, right? So people tend to believe that, that they are more ethical than they are actually are. Okay, so you might see someone says that I am honest, and because of that, I will not lie. You see somebody says that I would never steal, and all those kind of things, right? Now, they noted in the curriculum that studies have actually shown that these internal traits generally are not the main determinants of whether or not someone might actually be ethical. Okay. Yes, there are some people which is the best thing anyone can do for themselves. Okay. To, to have your standards, things that you can't and can't do. Okay. So that is one of the things that everyone that really wants to build their character should try to cultivate. Okay. So you know that, okay, so this, I can't do this. I don't do this either. And you say it and you actually mean it. Okay. But they noted in the curriculum that in the long term, right, that they noted that studies have actually shown that these internal traits alone is not the the main determinant of whether someone might be ethical or not. Okay, that the environmental factors actually also have a higher impact. So, like I said, someone might actually be ethical, but the environment they are saying, if they don't groom their character so well, if they are not careful, their environment can actually influence them. Okay. And they notice this, especially in a situation that you haven't been involved in. Okay. So let's say someone has been offered a bribe of, let's say 100, let's say 100,000, or let's say 1 million, or even 10 million, and the person rejected the bribe, right? The person rejected the bribe. And that same person has been offered a higher bribe, or if that person has seen bribes and rejected, that kind of person is a person of character. The person of character. So if that kind of person tells us that if I see a bribe of this, I'm not going to take, that person so that person has actually built his own what do they call it? That person has actually built his own internal traits or intrinsic motivation. But there are some other persons that if they say that, we'll take them to be joking, especially because we know that they haven't actually been in a situation whereby they are just saying it. They are just saying it just for mouth's sake. They haven't really been in a situation that tests that from them, right? So yeah, so generally people tend to have overconfidence bias. That's actually what the standard is saying. I hope it's clear.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. Now, let's talk about the what do they call it? The ethical versus legal standards. Ethical versus legal standards. So, so first of all, you need to note this. So there are some behaviors that might be ethical, and those behaviors are not legal. And there are some behaviors that are legal, but those behaviors are considered unethical. Okay, so there are some behaviors that you act is both legal and ethical. There are some also that are both illegal and unethical. There are behaviors like that. So if you steal, for example, stealing is both illegal and stealing is also unethical. Now, if you take things like probably fairness or whatever, you might see that it's also both justice and all those kind of things. It's both legal and ethical. Now, in the curriculum, they noted some behaviors that may be considered ethical, but may actually violate existing local law. So whistleblowing. So we know what whistleblowing is. So there was a time in Nigeria everybody was blowing whistle. So if you notice that maybe someone is involved in money laundering, you can go and blow whistle to EFCC or whatever. So whistleblowing can actually, so there are some countries, so we know that whistleblowing is an ethical thing, right? So you're actually doing it so that to discourage some of those kind of behavior. But there are some countries that whistleblowing might actually violate the existing local laws. That means it's considered illegal. Okay, acts of civil disobedience like peaceful protest might actually be ethical, but there are some countries that you are not allowed to protest, whether peaceful or not. Not allowed to protest. Okay, so these are some examples of
Or
actions that can
Nigeria.
actually be considered ethical. Somebody said Nigeria. I didn't say anything. No.
Or Nigeria because teachers. I don't know.
Oh, it's what somebody just mentioned Nigeria. Did we hear that? Okay. So there are some, yeah, so there are some actions that can actually be considered ethical, but in some countries they will consider it that you are violating local laws if you do them, right? Now, also, there are some actions that might actually be legal in some jurisdictions, but are considered unethical. So example is trading with material non-public information. So CFA Institute actually considers this unethical. In fact, it's one of our standards we're going to discuss. Okay, so if you trade with material non-public information, it may be legal in some countries, but it is considered unethical. Okay, so just note that law and ethics is not necessarily the same. That's the summary. Now, let's talk about some of the limitations of law in ensuring ethics. So there are some of them. So one of them is that law tends to lack market practice. So it's actually when a market practice, maybe probably a bad practice has been occurring in the market, the law will recognize and the government or the regulatory bodies will recognize that practice and now come up with a law forbidding that practice. Okay, so but with ethics, we know that there are certain things that you don't even need to have a law against it for you to know that that is not ethical, right? Yeah, so we say that law tends to lack market practices. So probably the particular thing might have actually caused a big harm before the law recognized it to now come up with a law against it. Sometimes the law can actually be vague or conflicting. Okay, so if you go to the Nigerian Constitution, we have different laws and regulation, and sometimes this law can actually be vague, and that is why you notice that by the time we go to the law courts, the way they will interpret this law, even you that have some basic understanding of English will now be confused, right? Yes, so it's subject, it can be vague and it's subject to interpretation. I believe that most of us have maybe probably listened to some of the, verdicts and some of the, cases in some of the courts in Nigeria. And sometimes by the time they come up with the verdicts and interpreting the Nigerian constitution or the laws, and you will now be wondering, is it that you don't understand English again, or is it that, they are trying to say something else? Yeah, so law sometimes can actually be vague. It can also conflict with existing laws. So there are some laws that can come up and conflict with existing laws, creating loopholes self for people to act unethically. And those people, after acting, they'll tell you go to court, and they will come to court and they will say, so this is what the law states here, and this is what the law states here, and if we do this, that means this thing is allowed, right? It can also be narrow in scope. And then we know that laws tend to vary across countries and jurisdictions. So if the law prohibits what you are doing in this particular country, you can look for another country whereby the law is more relaxed and go there and continue what you are doing. Okay. So we know that ethics goes beyond legal requirements. So ethics actually involve that you make good choices in the absence of clear laws. And also, ethics also involves that you act considering the various stakeholders' interest and you try to benefit those multiple stakeholders. So ethics actually goes beyond laws. Okay, to be sure we are together. So let's test ourselves. What's the answer to number one?
I'll go with C.
Okay, someone says C. Okay, legal standard represents the highest standard. Okay, any other person? Any other person? We didn't hear you. Is it your network or someone was trying to say something?
I'll say A.
Okay, someone say A. Okay. Any other person?
Why B?
Yeah? I didn't hear you.
Okay.
Okay, so the correct answer to number 1 is B. So so A says that all legal behaviors are ethical behaviors, not necessarily. Ethics actually goes above legal requirements. So all legal behaviors are not necessarily ethical behaviors, right? Yeah, but some behaviors can actually be ethical, but maybe illegal. So we gave examples of that. So acts of civil disobedience, we said that is one example of an action that can be ethical or may actually be illegal. Then C says that legal standard represents the highest standard. Not necessarily. Ethics actually goes above. Ethics have higher standard than legal standard. So there are some actions that might actually be legal, but they are unethical. So we give an example of trading with material non-public information. Okay. So that is actually the, what do they call it? So B is actually the correct thing. What about number 2?
Is it my network? I can't hear anything.
Can any other person hear me?
Sure, I can hear you.
Yeah.
So probably it might be for your network. Maybe if you can refresh or check the network out. Okay. So what about number 2? Who is that? Who is belling the class?
Sorry, what question are we answering?
Number 2?
What we see?
C is actually correct. Yes, C is actually correct. So number 2 is C. Okay. Now, the final thing we have for this learning is the ethical decision framework. Okay, so before we talk about ethical decision framework, let's talk about how to build trust and culture in a particular firm. Okay, so we have established this fact that says that trust is very, very essential in the investment management world. And we have said that if you want to build trust, we have said some of the things that you can do: interdependence between firms and the investment management industry. We also talked about ethics, complying with your code of ethics and standards. Okay. Another way you can build up trust in your organization now is to have a culture of integrity and accountability. Okay. So that can actually help when we are dealing with a firm. So the senior management actually plays a very vital role in developing and maintaining a strong ethical culture within a firm. So obviously, people in the firm tends to reflect the management. Okay, so if you are working in a firm whereby the senior management is committed to maintaining a strong ethical culture, before you know, you will actually have to adapt or you leave. Because obviously, in those kind of firm where the senior management, upholds a strong ethical culture, any employee that is not willing to comply has to leave, right? So the senior management actually plays a very key role in doing this. Okay, and adopting a code of ethics is actually a good thing, but it's insufficient. Okay, so you actually need just not to focus on adopting alone. You also need to focus on practicing, because we know that someone says that practice makes progress, right? practice makes progress. So the more you keep on practicing a thing, the more you get better at it. So the same thing. So it's not just that we have a code of ethics in the firm. No, you're expected to practice. The more you keep on practice, the more you get better at making ethical decisions. Now, by definition, the ethical decision framework provides investment professionals with a tool that can help them to adhere to the code of ethics, with a tool that can help them to analyze potential or alternative action and consequences of any decision they are going to take. So we can simply say that ethical decision framework is a tool, and the goal of this tool is to help professionals to adhere to a code of ethics and also to analyze the potential alternative actions and the consequences of their decision. So there are certain things the ethical decision frameworks help, what do they call them? The professionals to do. So one of them is that it can help them to develop sound judgment and decision-making skills. So this is a framework that helps our thought process or our decision-making process. And with that framework, you can learn how to come up with a sound decision. It can also help you to see situations from multiple perspectives. So if you actually have a framework that you follow when you are making ethical decisions, you can see situations from multiple perspectives. It can also help you to explain and justify whichever action you take to the broad audience of stakeholders. So this was the action. So I'm going to give you an example of framework the CFA Institute have, and we're going to just use a case study to address it, okay? So you can tell the stakeholder, so this was the situation, and this was what I did, and this was the steps I followed, and this was how I arrived at my decision. And, they can follow your thought process and know whether your decision-making skills is sound. Now, there is one key point to note. So if you use any ethical decision framework, it's not a guarantee of having a positive outcome, but it can actually help you to avoid making unethical decisions or making decisions that have unintended outcomes or unintended consequences. So that is actually what using an ethical decision framework can help you to do. So this is the ethical decision framework that was designed by the CFA Institute. So it just has 4 steps. We identify, we consider, we decide and act, and then we reflect. So let's go through this. So let's just use a case study. Okay, so let's say you're working in a firm and then you're a research analyst and your employer asks you to issue a research report that you actually know is false, right? So the first thing to make your ethical decision is to identify. So first of all, you need to identify the relevant facts. So what are the relevant facts? My employer told me to issue a research report that is not, true, or a faulty research report. Now, that is a relevant fact. Now, you need to get the stakeholders and the duties owed to them. So your clients are the stakeholder involved here. Your employer is a stakeholder. You also in the matter, you're a stakeholder. The general general public is also a stakeholder. Okay. Then probably your employees in the firm are also stakeholders. So you need to note about, so who and who will be impacted by this decision I'm about to make? You note all of those. Now, what are the ethical principles? So duties to clients, we're going to discuss it, is an ethical principle there. Duties to employer is ethical principles, all those ethical principles. So you bring out all these ethical principles. So the conflict of interest is also another thing. So what are the conflict of interest? So my employer's interest versus now my client's interest, the investment profession interest, and then probably the other employee's interest. So you have brought out all this, you have identified all these things. Then you move to the next step, consider. So what are the situational influences? So your employer is a very big situational influence in this case study. So your employer wants you to issue a research report that is faulty, probably because he wants to, let's say you researched and you found out that these shares, you are meant to recommend to the clients to sell the shares. But your employer, because your employer is seeking a business relationship with the company in question, the employer is telling you to change the recommendation to a buy. because he wants a business relationship with the company in question, right? So obviously, in this case, your employer is a very big situational influence, your loyalty to him, right? So you can go and seek additional guidance. So you can seek guidance from, the legal department, legal compliance office. You can seek guidance from other parties you believe are ethical. You seek guidance from, the code and standards. What did the code say? What did the standards say? So after seeking those guidance and alternative actions that you can take, so is there any other thing that I can do not to actually, create a friction with my employer and still be ethical, act ethically? So you check all these alternative action. Now, after doing that, you make a decision. So probably you make a decision, I'm not going to issue that report. My recommendation still remains, and this is what I'm issuing. You make your decision and you take action. Now, once you take the action, you can now go back to reflect. So you assess the outcome, you identify the shortcomings. So this was my decision. What was the impact on the stakeholders? What were the shortcomings of my decision? You can now. So that's all the things that you do on that reflect. Now, key thing you need to notice that this process is often iterative, so you can actually move between phases. So it's not that you have to do 1, 2, 3, 4. You can do 1, get to 2, and notice that you have to go back to 1 again. Okay, so you can jump steps and you can move in between steps. Okay, is there any question on this? Do we have any question? Any question? Any question? Okay, so in the absence of no question, let's attempt this question.
Please go back to the question.
I'm on the question, number 1 question. Can't you see the questions?
No, I can see it now. It was on the other page.
Okay, okay.
C.
Okay, someone
C.
says number 1, C. Yeah, C is correct. Number 2.
I think A.
A.
Yes, A is correct. A is correct. Number 3.
C.
C.
Yes, C is correct. C is correct. Okay, good. And so that actually brings us to the end of this topic. Okay. I believe that if you follow through what we discussed in this topic should be a walkover. If you go to the CFA curriculum, there are some other questions that you can also, attempt to help yourself. And like we said, don't forget, like I said something earlier on, apart from teaching CFA candidates, I also teach people how to learn effectively. And one of the ways to learn effectively is that whenever you are done with any learning, don't just pack that thing and go and keep it to one side. The concept of forgetting curve says that you are going to forget. So you tend to reinforce that thing immediately. The earlier you do it, the better. Okay, so and one of the keys of reinforcement is keep on testing yourself. Okay, so you can go and review that thing you learned again, or you can go and solve questions based on that thing to make sure that you actually retain whatever you learned. Okay, so this is where this particular topic ends. Yes. Okay, so we have code of ethics, so code of standards, code of ethics and standards of professional conduct. So this is the next topic that we have, and the code of ethics we are going to learn is something that once you are a member of the CFA Institute or you are a candidate, you are required to adhere to this code of ethics. So we are going to first of all start out by discussing the structure of the CFA Institute Professional Conduct Program. Okay, so that is where we are going to start from. Now, there is something they call the Standard of Practice Handbook. Okay, so the Standard of Practice Handbook provides guidance to which CFA Institute members and candidates are required to. So with if you see the book, is a handbook. Okay, so it shows us the guidance that are required or things that you need to do or follow in order to adhere to the CFA Institute Code of Ethics and standards of professional conduct. Now, there are certain groups that we need to discuss about in the CFA Institute Professional Conduct Program. So these are the group that makes the CFA Professional Conduct Program worthwhile. Okay, so we are going to discuss some of them. So we are going to start with the first person we have. So there are a group of persons we call the CFA Institute Board of Governors, the CFA Institute Board of Governors. So they are the ones responsible for maintaining oversight and responsibility for this product or the professional conduct program. Okay, so we have the Board of Governors. They are like the we have in the CFA. So when it comes to setting the minimum passing score, you see them there. When it comes to maintaining oversight of your professional product conduct program, you also see them there. There are also an important group again we also need to talk about. So we call them the Disciplinary Review Committee, the CFA Disciplinary Review Committee. So these are made up of charter holders. So these are one of those volunteer community that we talked about. So if you become a charter holder, you can decide to volunteer and become among the member of the Disciplinary Review Committee. Okay, so if you become a member, your job is to work in conjunction with the professional conduct program staffs. And your job there is to enforce the codes and standards. So if you see me using C and CS, that means codes and standards. So the Disciplinary Committee Review Committee, they work in conjunction with the professional program conduct staff, and their job is to enforce the code and standards. So if somebody violates the code and standards, these are the group of parties, charged with the responsibility of enforcing it. Now, there is also something they call the CFA Institute Bylaws and Rules of Procedure for Professional Conduct. Okay, so this actually forms the basic structure for enforcing the conduct codes and standards. So sometimes we also call this thing the rules of procedure. Okay, so basically it's the structure that we use in enforcing when the disciplinary committee wants to enforce the code and standard. I hope everyone can hear me. Have any other person joined us?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Now, another party or group of persons we have under this, professional conduct program is a group we call the Professional Conduct Division. Professional Conduct Division. So they work with the Disciplinary Review Committee, and their job is also to review the professional conduct policies and also to enforce testing policies of the CFA Institute and any other programs of the CFA Institute, like the CIPM. Okay, so this body is there to review the professional conduct policies and also to enforce testing policies. So one of the guidelines we are going to be talking about is your duty as a CFA Institute candidate and a CFA charter holder. So there are some things. So like we're going to talk about the aspect of your exam testing policy. So there are certain things that you are allowed or not allowed to do on the exam day. So some of those things, when we get there, we are going to discuss it. So this professional conduct division are the ones that, review the professional policies and also enforce testing policy. The final group we have is a group we call the Standard of Practice Council. Standard of Practice Council. So this is also one of those groups that are made up of volunteer charter holders. So if you also become a charter holder, You can also volunteer to be among the standards of practice council. Now, their own job is to maintain and interpret the code and standards. That is their own job. So they want to make sure that the codes and standards are effective. Okay, so for the code and standards to be effective, we need to make sure that they represent a high standard of professional conduct. We also need to make sure that they are relevant given the changing nature in the investment profession. We also need to make sure that they are globally applicable. Also, we need to make sure that they are sufficiently comprehensive, practical, and specific. We need to make sure that they are enforceable. And finally, we need to make sure that they are testable. So this is the job of the Standard of Practice Council. Their main job is to maintain and interpret and make sure that the codes and standards remain effective. I hope we are together. Is there any question? Any question?
We're good.
Okay, good. So make sure you note all these bodies that we've talked about and make sure you know their own job. Each of them have a specific job in the professional conduct program. Now, let's talk about the sources of professional conduct inquiries. Sources of professional conduct inquiries. Now, how does CFA Institute get to know when there is a violation of the codes and standard? How do they get to know? Okay, so there are about 5 sources that can, help the CFA to know when someone has violated the codes and standard. The first one is self-disclosure. Okay, so this is basically you reporting yourself to the CFA Institute, telling them that you have done something wrong, okay, potentially wrong. So if you remember, if you registered for the level 1 exam yourself, when you were registering the exam, there were certain questions that they were asking you. Have you involved in certain legal, whatever? Have you involved in this? Have you involved in a litigation? There were some questions like that. Did anybody see those questions? Did anybody notice those questions when you are registering for your level 1? Did anybody see it?
Maybe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so they normally ask those kind of questions. So those questions are questions that can, trigger investigation. Also, when you become a charter holder, we need to do something we call annual. So we actually need to submit it every year. Okay, so our policy statement, so professional conduct statement, they call it PCS. Your professional conduct statement. So every year, the charter holders actually are required to pay their membership fee and also submit this annual professional conduct statement. So in also submitting it, they also ask you some of those kind of questions, which you answer yes or no, and all those kind of things. So that can actually trigger an inquiry. Another one is written complaint. So any written complaint about you to the CFA Institute can trigger investigation. So written complaints can come from your client, it can come from your employer, it can come from any other person that knows that you're a charter holder. Probably you guys had a business and let's say it's a client. So you invested this client's money in a particular security and the client lost money and the client knew that you're a charter holder and decided to write a report against you to CFA Institute, right? That can actually trigger an investigation, okay? Yes, so written complaints from any party can trigger investigation. Other one is the external awareness. So CFA can actually become aware about your, what do they call it? About violation on your part from any regulatory notice or public source, etc., or media. So let's say it came out in the news there were certain persons involved in money laundering, or there are certain persons involved in trading with material non-public information on any of those kind of things. So it comes out in the news, and your name was mentioned among the, and CFA just finds out that name and triggers it, and you checks it, and you're a charter holder. Okay, so an inquiry can actually come. Then again, exam monitoring. In fact, so this one, it's like the highest one. This is like the highest source that triggers investigation. this is like the highest place investigation can actually come from the exam. So you actually on the exam day need to be very careful and follow the exam rules and regulation. You also need to follow through with all what the proctor is saying. Okay. So remember when I wrote my level 3 exam, so there was a friend of mine, we wrote together. So then we wrote in Ghana. So he said, then it's not online like they are doing it now. We shade. So by the time they say get ready to stop, they will say stop. And once they say stop, you are required to drop your pen or your pencil immediately. So the guy said that when they said stop, he didn't stop immediately, right? I think he just scripts down something and dropped the pen. So the proctor pointed at him. He now like raised up his hand, or like he didn't do anything. The proctor didn't even talk to him. So the day they were releasing our results, his result didn't come out, and he actually sent a message after waiting for a while to CFA Institute complaining that he hasn't seen his result. And they told him that he was involved in exam malpractice. And it was like, what happened? They said that he didn't stop when they asked everyone to stop. And he had to rewrite that level. Somebody say, "Wahala." So he had to rewrite that level again. Okay. So you wouldn't want something as careless, and maybe that thing that he wrote might not even necessarily had even added anything to him, right? So you wouldn't want any careless mistake to make you to forfeit. I used to tell the students, all of us know how much the dollar is right now. So with the current exchange rates, you know the worth of the CFA. In fact, if you had to press on standard payment, registration and paying for the exam is about 1,600. That's standard payment. So if you press 1,600 by the current exchange rate, you agree with me that that's over 2.something million naira. Okay, so you wouldn't want to joke with 2.something million naira investment. Although I know that some of us here are big boys. So in case anybody wants to joke with that kind of money, I can also send my account number, right? And that can really do one or two things. So what are we trying to say? Don't joke with the proctors. You have to really follow the exam rules and regulations on that. So there are things like the calculator policy, there are things like the personal belonging policies and all those kind of things. So you really need to follow the proctors. Then the final one is post-exam analysis and online monitoring. So CFA Institute says that even after your exam, that they analyze the scores and the exam materials to know whether a candidate was involved in exam malpractice. And also, they do monitor your social media to know if you post any confidential exam information, which will also be a violation. And that will also trigger an investigation. So these are like the different sources that the CFA Institute gets to know when someone has violated the exam malpractice, and as a result, investigations can start. I hope we're together.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Now, let's talk about what happens when an investigation is initiated. So when any professional inquiry comes from any of these sources, whether being that you disclose, another party reported you, exam malpractice, social media, and all those things. Once it happens, there are some processes or steps that will be followed by the CFA Institute. So the first one is investigation. Okay, so basically, investigation will involve written explanations, interview, and document collection. So probably CFA Institute will reach out to you, probably send you an email. A client sent us also thing, and so because of that, we would like to get your own side of the story. They might request some documentations from you. They might do some interview, asking you for explanation. What did you do? What did you not do? And all those kind of things, right? Now, after getting those information they need, conducting the interviews, the investigations, and everything, they will come up with three things. So one is that you didn't do anything, and because of that, we are not going to sanction you, right? Yes, that's the first thing. Another thing is that you did something, but what you did is not really that severe. Because of that, we are going to warn you to be more serious and take more caution so that you don't end up into trouble. And the final one is that they will conclude that you really violated the code of ethics and you violated the standards. And because of that, we are going to discipline you. So these are the three things that can actually come. Now, once it comes, you have the right to respond. Okay, so you can actually respond and tell them that, okay, so that you believe, just like what they do in law courts. So you can tell them that, okay, so if you can say that, okay, so you accepted that you violated, and because of that, you're accepting this proposed sanction that they gave you. Or you can tell them that you believe that you didn't do anything wrong. Okay, so just like what they do in courts, that I didn't do anything wrong. Okay, and if you say you didn't do anything wrong, then the matter will be taken up from the professional conduct staff to the panel of disciplinary review committee. So this is now like your spring court. So the disciplinary review committee will collect the materials from both sides, review all the presentation, review all the materials to decide whether you actually violated the codes and standards. So if the disciplinary review committee said, after reviewing everything, you actually did violate the codes and standards, then they are going to go ahead to sanction you. So that one, you can't reject or accept anything. Any punishment they decide, you are going to take it. So some of the potential sanctions given by the CFA Institute might be public censor, whereby the CFA Institute can come up to the general public and make it open. So certain people were involved in this. So one of them is a charter holder. CFA Institute doesn't agree with this kind of act, and we actually forbid this kind of act. So the charter holder actually acted against our own decision. So it's like public, they call it public censure. Another one is suspension from membership. So if you're already a member, they can suspend you. Or if you're a charter holder, they can actually suspend you from using the charter holder for a while. Another one is revocation. They can actually take away the charter from you. So this one, like the extreme one, to revoke the charter from you. Okay, so after suffering and writing the exam, paying all this huge money, they will now tell you that you no longer have the right to use the charter again. That's also where they are taking out the charter away from you, right? Yeah, so that is for members, that is for charter holders. For candidates, you can actually face suspension. Okay, so they can, even prohibit you, depending on the severity, they can prohibit you from further participating in the CFA program. Okay, like in my friend's case, they seized his results and he was required to go and rewrite the level. Okay, so these are the processes that are being followed whenever an investigation is triggered. I hope we are together. Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. All right. So the code and standards actually apply to members of the CFA Institute and the candidates in the CFA program. So the code and standards actually apply to this group of persons. So the CFA Institute also encourages firms to adopt the code and standard as part of their ethics. But remember, it basically applies to just candidates and charter holders, that is members of the CFA Institute. Now, if a firm decides that they want to adopt the code of ethics, it's actually allowed. But before they, once they adopt it, they have to comply with all the principles in the codes and standard. Now, once they comply with all those principles, they can now go ahead to make a compliance statement. Please make sure you note this compliance statement so they can actually come out in the OBJ exam. So make sure you note the structure. So this is how the compliance statement goes. So you are going to put your name. So Dangote PLC claims compliance with the CFA Institute Code of Ethics and Standards of Professional Conduct. This claim has not been verified by the CFA Institute. So this is how the firm gets to claim compliance. Now, the CFA Institute also have what they call the assets Managers Code of Professional Conduct. So this is actually designed to help asset managers comply with the regulations of, mandating or, regulations of Code of Ethics. So if you're a firm, you can also actually also adopt this. Now, we are now going to go ahead to talk about the standards. Sorry, so we'll talk about the codes first and we'll talk about the standards. Now, so what I tell students is this: your job is to go and take time. Do you see this code? Your job is to go and take time and memorize all of them. Take time and memorize all of them. So if you go to the end of chapter question on this topic, which I'm going to encourage, see, these topics we are doing today, I will encourage everybody to go to their curriculum immediately, go and solve their end of chapter questions on this. Don't joke with ethics, so make sure you master ethics at least. It's going to also help us to make sure that the time we spent here today is worthwhile, okay? Yeah, so one way you are going to show us that the time we spent here today is worthwhile is that at the end of this lecture, you are going to go to the ethics and go and start practicing and reviewing and consolidating this. Everybody that attended this lecture, you should do very well in ethics if you actually engaged, participated, and reviewed what we have done in this lecture. Ethics should be a walkover, okay? So the Code of Ethics, there are actually just 6 of them. And like I said, your job is to memorize them, because by the time you start solving the question, you just notice that basically the way they test it sometimes might just be, maybe they might just remove a phrase or add another phrase that is not exactly what is in the statement, okay? So what I did when I was writing my level 1 was to take my time to really try to memorize this. Now, the first one says that that members and candidates, okay, are to act with integrity, competence, diligence, and respect, and in an ethical manner with the public, clients, prospective clients, employers, employees, colleagues in the investment industry, and other participants in the global market. Summary: if you're a member or you are a candidate, you are to act with integrity, competence, diligence, and respect. Overall, act with an ethical manner whenever you are dealing with all the whole participants in the global capital market. That is the summary of this standard. The other standard, which is number 2, we have actually talked about it one way or the other. So you are to place the integrity of the investment profession and client's interest above your own interest. Okay, so you have to place the integrity of the investment profession and the client's interest above your own personal interest. That is the second standard. The third one says that you are to use reasonable care and exercise independent professional judgment when conducting investment analysis, making investment recommendation, taking investment action, and engaging in other professional activities. So summary says that you have to use reasonable care and exercise independent judgment whenever you are engaging in your professional activity. That is what the standard says, or this code says. The fourth one says that you should practice and encourage others to practice in a professional and ethical manner. And the goal is to reflect credit on yourself and also on the investment profession. So you practice and you also encourage others to practice in an ethical manner. And the goal is that you reflect credit on yourself and the profession. The fifth one says that you should promote the integrity and viability of the global capital market for the ultimate benefit of the society, okay? And finally, you are to maintain and improve your professional competence and strive to maintain and improve the competence of other investment professionals. Now, so these are the 6 code of ethics. Your job is to make sure, go and try your best to memorize this code. You might not necessarily need to memorize them one after the other. Me, personally, I even till now, I've written the level 1, 2, and 3, and I haven't memorized this thing like to say I can be saying it word by word. But if I see a wrong thing inside it, I will know why, because I've seen it many times, right? So if you're asking me in an OBJ question, maybe you list 3 of these and you rephrase a word. That's how. Go and check how they are testing it at the end of chapter question for this. So I believe all of us have enrolled for the exam. So you can go to the end of chapter, you see the way they are testing it. So they can just rephrase one thing. So if they rephrase, once you have really gone through it, you will know when they are rephrasing, removing one particular thing and adding something that is not meant to be there. Now, we have said that the Code of Ethics is the broad statements, and there are only 6. So this is not really where the main test in the exam is going to come. Maybe let's say 2 questions or so might just be, or 3 might just be in the Code of Ethics. The major place they are going to test is this place. We call it the standards of professional conduct. Okay, we call it the standards of professional conduct. So this is actually when the major test is going to actually occur, the standards of professional conduct. So let's look at these standards of professional conduct and see what they are. So there are actually 7 of them. There are 7 of them. And each of the standards do have babies. Each of them have babies. Okay, so in the next topic we are going to start. So we are going to introduce the next topic, because I told you that's where we are going to spend most of our time on ethics. So once I introduce it, you are going to see how these things are being tested. So the first thing we have is called professionalism. So under professionalism, we have knowledge of the law. Knowledge of the law. So the members and candidates, according to this, must understand and apply. So basically what I'll be doing here is to be reading this for you. Then I'm going to just be giving us some illustrations. When we now go to the guidance, we are still going to look at all these things again. And now we'll focus on what we should do in order to be in compliance with these standards. Okay, so that is how we are going to roll. So let's start. So professionalism have 4 substandard inside. Okay, so the first one is knowledge of the law. So you are required to know the law. So members and candidates must understand and comply with all applicable laws, rules and regulations. So that includes the CFA Code of Ethics and standards of professional conduct. So whenever you see me writing M and C, just know that is members and candidates. The goal is that I didn't want the slide to be clustered. So we are summarizing that with M and C's. That's just members and candidates. Okay, so you are to know, understand, and comply with all applicable laws, rules, and regulations. That includes the Code of Ethics and also of any government, regulatory organization, licensing agency, or professional association that governs your professional activity. That means if you are operating in Nigeria, and you are operating in the Nigerian capital market, so the SEC rules and regulation, you need to comply to them. The central bank, if you are in the banking side, you need to comply with them. The Nigerian Stock Exchange rules and regulation, you need to comply with them. Okay. Now it says that in event of conflict, you must comply with the most strict law. The most strict law, rules and regulations. So if the Code of Ethics is the strict one, comply with it. If the law is the strict one or the more strict one, comply with it. Then it also says that you must not knowingly participate or assist in, and you must disassociate yourself from any violation of rules, regulations, and also codes and standards. So don't participate and don't also, assist others in participating. And if you are in an environment where people are participating, your goal is to disassociate yourself from those violations. So the second baby standard under professionalism is independence and objectivity. So you are to use reasonable care and judgment to achieve and maintain independence and objectivity in your professional activity. So the key word there is reasonable care and judgment. Okay, so you are to use reasonable care and judgment to achieve and maintain independence and objectivity in your professional activity. So you are not to offer, you are not to solicit, you are not to accept any gift, benefit, compensation, or consideration that can be expected to compromise your own independence and objectivity or another person. So any gifts that you know that once you take, it will compromise your independence and objectivity. This standard says that you're not meant to ask for it and you're not even meant to accept it if you are giving. And don't also go and give somebody gifts that will compromise their own. I remember one time someone told us a story. I think he's an auditor or something. whereby they go to audit firms, and I think they went to audit this firm, and the kind of treatment they give them there is this kind of treatment that after giving you, your audit reports just have to, there are some things that, so imagine you go to audit a firm, and maybe they treated you in a massive hotel, made sure they took care of you, gave you, in fact, the treatment, many kind of things. And after doing that, and you now found out when you are auditing them, you are now noticing some shady things. Okay, so but those gifts that you have collected, if you are not careful, they can actually make you not want to, do the thing that you are meant to do. So CFA Institute says that you should not accept any gifts, and you should not also give somebody any gifts that will compromise their independence and objectivity. The third baby standard under professionalism states that you must not knowingly make any misrepresentation relating to investment analysis, recommendation, or action. So don't knowingly make any representation in your professional activity. Okay. So when we start addressing this standard, you will see that it will involve things like maybe probably your CV, your track record, your employment track record, or all those kind of things. So you are not to misrepresent. And the final one is misconduct. So any acts like dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or any act again that can, reflect adversely on your professional reputation, integrity, and competence. This standard says that you are not engaged. You are not to engage with this. So something like taking alcohol during office hours. So imagine you are taking alcohol and your client walks in and sees you taking alcohol. You can argue that you are just you're not doing anything, but your clients will just see you as someone irresponsible, or you are smoking during office hours. So there are things that this standard says that anything at all that will actually adversely reflect on your professional reputation, the standard says don't engage in it. So when we go to this guidance, we are going to talk about some of the detailed things that we need to do to be in compliance with this standard. So this is the first standard, and it's professionalism. So you notice that it has 4 sub-standards. Standard 2 is the integrity of the capital market. So basically there are 2 standards here. So we have material non-public information, and we have market manipulation. So this one says that members and candidates that possesses material non-public information that can affect the value of an investment, you must not act, and you must not also cause others to act on that information. Okay, so let's say you are, you work in the corporate finance department, and based on your job role, you are able to get a material non-public information. So these are information that can move market prices, or information that a typical investor will want to know before investing in a company. Okay, so let me give an example. So imagine a pharmaceutical company right now discovering a drug that cures HIV, and is this one, they have gone through all the relevant tests, and it's confirmed that truly this drug can cure HIV. You know how it can impact their share prices. Now that's a material non-public information, an information that has capacity to move the share prices. So if the investor goes ahead to trade with this information, is a violation of this standard. In fact, in some countries, apart from this being an ethical thing, is also an illegal thing to trade with your material non-public information. I was reading a book one certain time about someone, very wealthy man, very, very wealthy. And he, because of the nature of work he does, he got a material non-public information about a company. And he and his broker, whatever, went to go and, massively invest in that company. And they were caught that we are trading in that information, and they had to jail them. Okay, so in some countries, this is also illegal. The other one is market manipulation. So you are not to engage in any practice that would distort prices or artificially inflate trading volume. So by the time we start discussing about the guidance of this one, the intent is actually the key thing to judge whether someone violated this standard or not. So if you are doing that with an intent to deceive or mislead the market participants, that would actually be a violation. Is there any question based on what we have discussed so far?
Yeah, I was just going to say something about the intent you just mentioned.
Okay.
Maybe
Okay.
when we get to that part. I mean, I think it's difficult to know people's intention, especially
Mm-hmm.
when they're not going to like tell you, okay, yeah, this is why I did it.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe
Mm-hmm.
when we get to that part.
Okay. I love that. I love that notification. In fact, it's difficult to know people's intent. But now, you as a candidate, when you are answering the questions on this, the question, you can decipher the intent based on how the question is phrased. Do you understand? So in the real world, it's actually difficult to know the person's intent. But for the purpose of the exam, okay, based on how the question was phrased, you can actually, have an insight whether this person has an intent to mislead people. Okay. Yeah. So, but when we still get there, like you said, we are going to talk more about it. Now, the third standard, so we have duties to clients. So there are 5 baby standards here. Okay. So we have first one, prudent loyalty and care. I used to call this one PLC. It helps me to remember it. Okay. So this one says that you have a duty of loyalty to your clients and you must act with reasonable care and exercise prudent judgment. Okay. So if you remember and you're a candidate, you have to act for the benefit of your client. And this standard requires that you have to place your client's interest above both your employer's interest and your own interest. Both your employer's interest and your own interest. So that is what we call PLC, prudence, loyalty, and care. The other one is fair dealing. So fair dealing says that you are to deal fairly and objectively with all your clients whenever you are engaging in your professional activity. So whether be that you are making investment analysis, recommendation, or taking investment action, the key word is fairly. You are to deal fairly. So by the time we get to the guidance, you'll notice that fairly does not mean equally, right? Yeah, so we are getting to the guidance. But we are even introducing. So once we are done with this one, we'll just introduce the guidance. Like I said, that guidance is where we are going to spend most of our time. And so we are just going to be doing it batch by batch. Okay. After the guidance, basically what we just have in ethics is the final lesson we have there is application. And the other one is keeps. So those readings are very short readings that we can even finish in one class. Okay. But this guidance is where we are going to be spending most of the time because that is where like 80 to 90% of the exam question on ethics would be coming from.
Are we doing that today?
We'll introduce it. Yes, immediately we are done with this one, we'll introduce it. We'll just do a fraction of it, just a fraction. So we see how it is. Then in our next class, we'll just be, because it's long actually. So what in the guidance, you see all these baby standard, we are going to take each of them one after the other and talk about things that we need to do in order to be in compliance. Do you understand? So it's going to really take a while. Yeah, so if we are done with this, we can probably introduce one of it and subsequently in our next class. I think we should be having another class probably on Monday.
All right.
Clear? All right, good.
Yeah, good.
Now the third one is suitability. So under suitability, members and candidates are we have 2 phases under suitability. So one is when you are in an advisory relationship with a client. Other one is when you are managing a portfolio to a specific mandate. Okay, so when you are in an advisory relationship and when you are managing a portfolio to a specific mandate. So if you are an advisor, someone that advises a client, there are 3 things you need to do. First, you need to make reasonable inquiry into your client's investment experience, their risk and return objectives, financial constraints prior to making any recommendation or taking any action. And you must assess and update this information regularly. So what this thing is saying is this: before you recommend any security to a client or you take any action on behalf of a client, once you are in an advisory relationship, your first job is to get to know your client's financial situation, get to know their investment experience, their risk and return objective before you recommend. So one of the clear violations of this one, maybe you might see a question like this that says, so a client comes to you and tells you that they have 5 million and this 5 million has been in their account for years and they don't know really what to do with it. And the investment advisor tells the client to go and bring the money. I know the hottest security in the market for you right now. And that is a clear violation of this standard. Before you say that, you have to get to know their clients and get to know their situation. Another thing is that you have to determine that the investments you are going to recommend to your client is suitable to them, given their financial situation. And you have to also make sure that that investment is consistent with the client's written objective, mandates, and constraints before going ahead. So if I'm to say I'm recommending First Bank shares, I need to make sure that First Bank shares is suitable given your situation and also consistent with your objectives and constraints. Okay, that's the second thing. And the third one is that we are to judge this suitability in the context of the client's total portfolio. So I'm not judging that security individually. I need to judge it in the context of the overall portfolio, how it is going to benefit the client. Then the second part of suitability is when you are just managing a portfolio according to a specific mandate. So let's say the mandate says that you should only invest in large cap stocks. That is what the mandate states, and that is what you are going to do. If you do any other thing outside that thing that mandate states, that will be a violation. Okay. So if you are given a mandate, so you are not an advisor, but you just have a mandate, this standard says follow that mandate. We also have another one under duties to clients. We call it performance presentation. Okay, so if you are communicating investment performance information to your clients, the member and candidate must make reasonable efforts to ensure that that information is fair, accurate, and complete. Okay, so if I'm telling my client this is my performance, so this is our asset management firm, this is our performance over the 5 years, I need to make sure that that report is fair. I need to make sure that the information contained there is accurate and it is also complete. And finally, under the duties to client is preservation of confidentiality. So the information about current, former, or please make sure you note this, because when you see this former, don't go and fall for it. So both your current clients, both your former clients, and also your prospective clients, any information you get from them is a confidential information. There are only 3 exceptions to this. So one is where your client is involved in illegal activities. Another one is where the law requires that you disclose that client's information. And another one is where the client or the prospective client permits you to disclose that information. So let me give you an example. So let's say you are an investment manager, and because of that investment manager, you have the account details of your client. And let's say someone contacts you that they have been trying to reach out to your client and they couldn't get through to him. And they want to make a certain donation to your client, or they want to give him some money, and they need the account details. And since they know that you are their portfolio manager, you have the account details, please can you send the account details that they just need to, make a donation or a transfer to them, right? Now, if you give that account details, then you'll be in violation of this standard. In as much as those person want to credit money, so you have to reach out to the client to know whether the client permits them to actually, send out this. I was even surprised. I remember, I don't know whether any person have experienced this. So probably you want to credit money to someone, and you go to bank, and let's say probably you lost the account details, but you're already in the bank. And you walked up to them, but you know the person's name, and you walked up to them and tell them, I want to deposit money to someone, and the person's name is so, but I just need the account details. Probably I've forgotten I lost it. And they will tell you that they will not give you the account details, and you'll be surprised. I want to just credit money, but they'll tell you they will not give you, right? Yes, and I believe that it's also part of their ethics that they are adhering to. Okay, so by the time we'll start discussing the standards or guidance in details, we are going to, give some more examples about some of these things. So your job, the best way to master ethics is, remember, it's mainly case studies. Have any of us here started reading ethics on our own personally? Anybody? Anybody? Have anyone started reading ethics on their own? Anybody?
Well, I can't speak for others, but
Okay, have you started?
no.
Okay. So I wanted to like, let me know how the person is experiencing some of the questions. So after this class, all of you should go and start. You already have more than enough to work with on ethics. Don't joke with this because I keep on stressing it. It's not because I'm lecturing. It's not because I'm the one taking this. It is because it is the right thing to do. You don't joke with a course. Out of 10 topics, this one has 15 to 20%. So you don't joke with it. It's almost like as if it's two courses on its own. Okay, so don't joke with it. And to be frank, this is one of the papers that once you enter the exam hall, you can easily finish ethics. Ethics doesn't take any time. It doesn't take any time. Once you master the principles and follow the things we are doing here, the questions should be very, very cheap for you. The next one, duties to employers. So you are to, first of all, be loyal. You are to be loyal. So the first one is loyalty. So in all matters related to employment, you are to act for the benefit of your employer. And you are not to deprive your employer of the advantage of your skills and your abilities. So that's the first thing. So don't deprive them of your skills and your abilities. Another thing, don't divulge confidential information of your employers to other parties. Okay, and also don't cause harm to your employer. So by the time we talk about the guidance, we are still going to tell you how to handle those things. The other one is additional compensation arrangements. So you must not accept any gift and any benefit or compensation or consideration that competes with or might reasonably be expected to create a conflict of interest with your employer's interest, unless you obtain a written consent from all parties involved. So that keyword, written consent. So we are still going to talk about that. So any compensation or consideration you are going to collect from any other person that is not your employer that can create a conflict of interest with what your employer is paying you, you are to, get a written consent from all parties involved. And finally, so this C applies to people that are supervisors. So if you are in any supervisory role, you are to make reasonable effort to ensure that anyone subject under your supervision complies with applicable laws, rules, regulation, and also the codes and standards. Okay, so this one actually applies to members and candidates that are also supervisors. Is there any question so far? Any question?
Very good.
Okay, I believe this course is cheap. Can we agree with that?
Let's hope so.
No, you don't have to hope so. It's actually cheap. It's actually so cheap. It's one of the cheapest courses we have in the CFA curriculum, in as much as it has weight, but it's the cheapest. But like we said earlier on, in as much as it's cheap, your job is to actually read it. No matter how cheap something is, if you don't know it, you don't know it. There are some questions that the day you enter exam hall, you see those questions, you will know that they are cheap. But probably because you didn't study it, you might not get it right. But you can also tell yourself when you see the question that this is a cheap question. That assuming I practiced or read very well, I should be able to answer that question. So it actually happens. So most of these questions we are discussing about, or these things you are talking about, they are all cheap things. All right, let's talk about the fifth standard. So that is investment analysis, recommendations, and action. So there are three things you need to do here. First one is diligence and reasonable basis. Okay, so if you are taking investment action, recommendation, or analysis, you need to have a diligence and a reasonable basis. So that thing means that you as a member or a candidate, you must exercise diligence, independence, thoroughness in analyzing investments, making investment recommendations, and taking investment actions. So you need to have a reasonable and adequate basis supported by appropriate research and investigation for any investment, analysis, recommendation, or action. Then the other one, so if you notice, this is C, but all these A, B, C, A, B, and C, you don't necessarily need to know those numbers, right? You don't necessarily need to know them in order. I actually put B in the next slide because B is actually big. So I brought C forward. So C is record retention. So members and candidates must develop and maintain appropriate record to support their investment analysis, recommendation, and action. So whenever you are taking any action, making a recommendation or making any analysis, any record that you use to support it, you have to maintain it. That is actually what the standard on record retention states. Now, the B part is the communication with clients and prospective clients. So basically, the way this one works is that this one is actually big enough. In fact, sometimes in a way, it have even mostly given out most of the things that you need to do in order to be in compliance. Okay, so members and candidates must disclose to clients and prospective clients the basic format, general principle of the investment process that they use to analyze investments, select securities, construct portfolio, and they must promptly disclose any changes that might materially affect these processes. So basically, the first one is saying that all the processes that you use to select securities, construct portfolios, and analyze investment, that you have to disclose it to your clients. And if there is any change that might materially affect those processes, that you have to disclose it. The second one says that you have to disclose to the clients and prospective clients any limitation or risk associated with the investment process. So any risk or limitations, let the clients know about them. The third one says that you have to use reasonable judgment in identifying factors that are important in the investment analysis and recommendation and action, and include those factors in your communication. So this one comes from the analyst. So you have to use your reasonable sense and say, okay, so some of these factors are important. I think they should be important to the clients. Let's let the clients know about them. And the final one, you have to distinguish between facts and opinion whenever you are making presentation. Okay, so when we come to what do they call the guidance, we'll talk about more about some of what this thing means. So sometimes if you are making your opinion, you have to make it clear. Opinions are not facts. So let's say the what do they call it? Okay, anyway, let me not go ahead of myself. When we get there, I'll give you some illustrations that you can actually relate with. The C standard, which is the second to last standard, is conflict of interest. Conflict of interest. So there are three standards here. So first one is disclosure of conflicts. Okay. So disclosure says that if you're a member or you're a candidate, you must make full and fair disclosure of all matters that could reasonably be expected to impair your independence and objectivity or interfere with respective duties to client. So any matter at all, anything at all. Let me give some examples. So let's say I was called to research. Let's just use Nesto. I was called to research Nesto, and I have some shares on Nesto. That can actually create independence and objectivity. Unless I was called to research Nesto, and I'm also among the board of directors in Nesto. So when we come to the guidance, we are going to see some of these matters. So anything at all that can create conflict of interest and make you to, lose your, what do they call it, independence and objectivity when you are performing your job for your clients. You have to disclose it, okay? And you have to make sure that those disclosures are prominent and delivered in plain language. And also, you need to communicate the relevant information effectively. So still, like the others, where we get to the guidance, we would give some case studies and also, talk about how we can adhere to this. What about priority of transaction? In summary, this standard says client first, employer second, member and candidates third. Variety of transactions says members first, clients first, employers second, members and candidates first. So investment transactions for clients and employers must have priority over the investment transaction in which the member or candidate is a beneficial owner. Clients, employers, you. The final one under conflict of interest is referral fees. So members and candidates must disclose to employer, clients, and prospective clients as appropriate any compensation, consideration, or benefit received from or paid to others for the recommendation of product and service. So if I'm going to be paid for recommending a product or service is a referral fee, I need to disclose it to the clients. Okay, we'll talk about why. So it can actually help the client to judge my motive. Am I really objective? So let's say that probably I'm a portfolio manager and a client comes to me. Probably I don't manage fixed income securities, and a client comes to me, and the client is looking for a fixed income manager. And there is a friend of mine that manages fixed income portfolios. I want to recommend these clients to him, right? So if he's going to pay me something for making that recommendation, the standard says that you are to disclose it so that the client can judge whether you are really objective with your recommendation. Okay? The final one. So this one actually applies to members and candidates in the CFA program. So but this particular standard is one of those standards you are not to joke with, because I believe there's no how you will not be tested on this, because this one now is the one that pertains to you as a candidate or as a member. So the first one is your conduct as participants in the CFA Institute program. Okay, so members and candidates, you must not engage in any conduct that compromises. So you are not to engage in any conduct that compromises compromises the reputation or integrity of the CFA Institute or the CFA designation, or the integrity, validity, or security of the CFA Institute program. So this one actually, especially like on the exam day. So like we said, we are going to have some proctors and people that are going to watch over us on the exam day. So if you are a member or you are a candidate, you are to actually follow what your proctors say on the exam day. So there is going to be like the calculator policy, there's going to be the candidate pledge. So you, the candidate pledge, you are not going to do so during the exam. There is going to be like the personal belonging policy. There are things that you are not allowed to bring into the exam hall. So all those kind of things, we are going to talk about that. I don't know, have they sent, so there is something they are to send to you people what you are going to take to the exam. Have they sent it? There is a printout they will send to your email you have to print and come to the exam with. Have they sent it to you?
I think that would be for people writing May.
Oh, okay. Some of us are not writing May. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, that's good. Okay. May, yeah, for people like me, if they haven't sent it, probably sometime next month then. Sometime next month, they will be sending it. Okay. So you have to, don't engage in anything that compromises their reputation. They don't joke with that one. Finally, we have the reference to CFA Institute Code of Ethics and Standard. Okay, reference to the CFA Institute, the CFA designation, and the CFA program. So when you are referring to the CFA Institute, the CFA Institute membership, is designation, or your candidacy in the program. In fact, I'm going to tell us, especially for this one, for candidates, I'm going to tell us some things that you're not meant to go and put. For example, you go to your LinkedIn profile, there are some things that you put there, you'll be in violation of this standard. Okay, so you can't put something like CFA Level I candidate expected graduation day or what the charter day. You can't put a number. So there are certain things you are not meant to put. And then when we come there, we are going to define who a candidate is. Okay. Yes, we are going to define who a candidate is, and we are also going to define who a charter holder is. Okay, so that you will know whether you're a candidate or not. So you're not also to misrepresent or exaggerate the meaning or implication of membership in the CFA Institute, okay, holding the CFA designation or candidacy in the program. So these are all the, what do we call them again? Standards of professional conduct. So there are 7 of them, and we have actually gone through 7 of them. Now, what we now need to do is to talk about the guidance. And like I said, the guidance is where we are going to be spending majority of the time allotted for discussing, and the guidance is the highly testable one. So your job is to, try to know what the standard says, but now the guidance is now like the details you need to know that can now help you to apply. Because how this question normally comes is that once they ask you the question, which is going to be like a case study, your job is now to judge whether this person violated the codes and standards based on the fact you understand the guidance. Is that clear?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Does any person have any question or any comments based on what we have discussed so far? So this is the guidance, right? So we're not really going to do much on it today. Let's just take small section of it. And in our next class on Monday, we are going to continue so that at least we can have a kind of insight on some of the things that we need to do in order to meet up to the guidance. Please, I'd like everyone to pay close attention. You see, this particular slide or guidance is where most of the question is going to be coming from. So I'll try as much as possible to, try to incorporate some examples that can, help us to appreciate this. So basically, do you see all the standards that we have gone through in the guidance? Now we are going to talk about them again, and now start talking about individual things that you need to do in order to be in compliance. So that when you are reading a question, your goal is this: when you are reading a question now, based on these principles and guidance, you are putting the principles. Did this person do this or did they not do this? So they are required to do this and they did not do it, they violated. They are not required to do this and they did it, they violated. So you are reading the question with the principles in your mind. It will help you to filter and know when someone is in violation and when someone is not in violation. I hope everyone can hear me loud and clear.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Now let's proceed. So the first one is professionalism, like we talked about. So we'll just maybe touch just either one or just 2 standards here, and we are done for the day. We'll be ending very soon. Okay. So the first one is knowledge of the law. Knowledge of the law under professionalism. So we can just do knowledge of the law and then do independence and objectivity. Then in our last class on Monday, we are going to continue. So we are also going to do, but by that Monday, I would like us to really at least cover and get to the duties to clients. So that probably maybe 3 or 4 meetings highest, we should be done with this course. It's not really much. Yes, but if you follow what I'm telling you to do and the way I'm actually leading us to do it, and if you follow the principle that at the end of this, just go and solve your questions. Make sure ethics becomes a walkover for you, something that can actually, help you to pass the exam. Because you see some people probably maybe 1 or 2 questions you can get right in ethics can be the saving grace that you actually need to pass the CFA exam. So like we said, 15 to 20% means that ethics will have the highest questions on the exam day, and it will also have the highest points pass this exam. Now, knowledge of the law. Members and candidates must understand and comply with all applicable laws, rules and regulations, including the CFA Institute codes of ethics and standards of professional conduct of any government, regulatory organization, licensing agency, or professional association governing their professional activities. In the event of conflict, members and candidates must comply with the more strict law, rule, and regulation. Members and candidates must not knowingly participate or assist in and must disassociate from any violation of such laws, rules, or regulation. So this is what the standard says that members and candidates should and should not do. Now, let's look at some of the guidance you need to follow. So we are going to first of all start by understanding the laws and regulation. So remember, we have said that members and candidates must understand and comply with all applicable laws, rules, and regulations in any country where you engage in your professional activities. Okay, so if you are engaging in your professional activities in Nigeria here, any laws, rules, and regulation that governs your professional activity, make sure you comply with this. So let's say you're a trader, you are an equity trader. So you know you need to adhere to the Nigerian Stock Exchange rules and regulation. You need to adhere with the Nigerian SEC rules and regulation. You need to, so any governmental agency that has rules and regulation that affects that your governs that your professional activity, you are to adhere with them. Okay, so professional activities here can include trading securities, providing investment advice, conducting research, like if you're a fixed income or equity research analyst, or if you are offering any other investment service like brokerage service or maybe credit rating service or any of those kind of service, you have to, comply and understand. So understand and then comply with the applicable laws and regulation. Now, this standard does not require you to become a compliance expert. Okay, so according to this standard, you are not required to be a compliance expert, somebody now knowing everything about the law and everything. But it requires that if there is any law and regulation that affects your professional activity, you are to comply with such rules and regulations. So that is actually what the standard requires of you. Now, this standard noted that laws and regulations do change over time, okay? So it is your job as a member or a candidate to stay updated and adjust your procedures and practices as the laws and regulation changes. So let me give you an example of, this particular point. So let's say that you are a trader, you are an equity trader, and let's say maybe sometime last week, what do they call them? The Nigerian Stock Exchange issued a new rules and regulation about trading, and probably there were some securities that according to the rules and regulations you are not allowed to trade henceforth, and you didn't know about it, and you now went ahead to go and trade that security. So the question will be, is this member or candidate in violation of the standard? And the answer would be that they violated the standard, that they are actually meant to be vigilant and, remain compliant, even when the rules and regulations are changing. So they should have known that this standard affects their professional activity and is a major one. So they should actually have, being updated about the standard. So this is understanding the rules and regulation. Now, there are some relationships between the code and standard and applicable law. So we have made this clear. And if there is any applicable laws and regulation that, affects your professional activity, you are, according to this standard, to comply with them. Okay? Now, this standard went ahead to say that you are also required to adhere to the codes and standard in absence of applicable laws, and also when the code and standard imposes a high degree of responsibility. So this brings that concept that we mentioned before, that you should follow the most strict one. Okay. So let's say you are operating. Okay, I'm going to come there. Let's talk about the third bullet point. So the third bullet point says that you should avoid any conduct that violates the code and standards, even if it's legal. So even if it's legal, even if the law allows you to do that, but the code and standards says that you should not do it, then avoid it. So let's say, for example, we have said material non-public information. You are not allowed to trade with material non-public information. So if you go ahead to trade with material non-public information because it is legal in your jurisdiction, it would actually be a violation of this standard. Now, sometimes the codes can say another thing. The applicable law can say another thing. The requirement according to the standard is that you should follow the stricter of the two. So let's say the code and standard says don't trade with material non-public information. The law says that you are allowed to trade with material public information. Then don't trade with material non-public information. The code and standard says that if you are going to get a referral fees, you are to disclose it to the client. And let's say in the jurisdiction you are operating, there is no law or rules and regulation that pertains to disclosing referral fees. Then the stricter one is disclose referral fees. Okay, so if you are reading the question, this is one of those kind of parts that you are likely to see questions from. So once you're reading the question and you notice that the law and the code of ethics and standards is saying a different thing, follow the stricter of the two. I hope we are communicating.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, good. So that is how you roll whenever you get this. Now let's talk about participation in violation. So this standard says that you must not knowingly participate in or you assist. Don't do that. So when you see people violating the laws and regulation, okay, so probably in your organization, you notice people trading with material non-public information, you notice people, engaged in money laundering, you notice people, doing all sorts of violations. This standard says don't participate in it and don't also assist them in participating. Don't assist them in participating. Okay? Yes, don't assist them in participating. And, the standard also applies when you know or should know that your conduct contributes to a violation. Okay? So if you know that what you are doing is a violation, this standard applies. And also, if you should know that what you are doing is a violation. So this, attends to that case that we talked about. You remember when we talked about a case that the SEC or Nigerian Stock Exchange changed their trading rules and regulation, and you didn't know, we will still say that you violated, because we expect that you are an investment professional in that industry and your primary job there is trading. You should know that when trading laws and regulation actually change. Okay, so this standard applies when you know or should know. Now, according to this standard, you are to disassociate from any illegal or unethical activity. So we are going to talk about the steps to disassociate. So if you notice in your organization or in your office, people are engaged in illegal or unethical activities, this standard says that you are to disassociate for them. And the reason for disassociating is that inaction combined with continued association with those involved in any illegal, unethical conduct can actually be construed that you are participating or you are assisting them. Okay, so if you don't do anything in your office, you don't do anything, but in your office they keep on doing all these illegal activities and anything, they can actually claim that you are participating or you are assisting them in such actions. So how do you disassociate? So first of all, if you want to disassociate, you can actually walk up to whoever is committing any illegal.
Hello.
Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah, am I the only one that can't see the screen, the slide again?
Okay, good. All right, so let's talk about the steps for disassociation. The step for disassociation. Okay, so if you want to disassociate, the one thing you can do first of all is that you can attempt to, stop the behavior. by informing your employer through your supervisor or compliance department. So first of all, you can actually just walk to the person committing the illegal or unethical activity to try to discuss with them. If they fail to listen, you can now go and talk to your supervisor or the compliance department. Now, if it's unsuccessful, there are now some steps you can take to disassociate. So you can actually ask for a different assignment. So probably in your organization, these illegal activities emanating from your own office, you can actually ask them to post you to a new office, or you can ask them for a new assignment altogether. You can also refuse taking on any new clients till they stop doing whatever they are doing. You can also tell them to remove your name from any written reports that probably. So sometimes they will have this group written report whereby they will write all the analyst name that were involved. So if you believe that report is fraudulent or whatever, you can tell them to remove your name from such reports, and you can also decide and leave the employment. So in fact, this is one of their recommendations, that if you notice that whatever they are doing in your office becomes much and you have tried to stop it and you can't stop it, that you should consider looking for employment somewhere else. Now, the CFA Institute actually encourages members and candidates to report potential violations. So if you're a member or you're a candidate, if there is any potential violation you noticed about another member or a candidate, CFA Institute, so watch the word, they encourage you to report members and candidates, but it's not compulsory. So if you saw another member or a candidate violating the codes and standards, if you report them, fine. If you don't report them, fine. So you are not forced, but you are encouraged. Okay. And also, according to this standard, you are not required to go and report anybody to any governmental or regulatory organization unless the law requires it. And if the law requires it, the law is the most strict one. You follow the law. You get it? This standard says that you are not required to go and report anybody, be it a member, a candidate, your firm, or anybody to the governmental or regulatory organizations. You are not required according to this standard. But if the law requires that you are to report a member, a candidate, or your firm when you notice they are doing certain things, then the law becomes the most strict standard. Then you comply with the law. Okay. Then the final thing here is that if you are a member or you're a candidate involved in creating or maintaining investment products and services, you must understand the laws in the region of origination and sale. So let's say that I'm a Nigerian. I actually work in Nigeria here, but I create some financial products that are sold in Ghana or some other West African countries, right? I need to also know the laws and regulations in those regions where those products and services would be selling. So I need to actually undertake some due diligence to learn about some of those their laws and regulation. And sometimes I might actually seek guidance from probably the legal department or any other person that has more information about the laws and regulations for those regions where those products and services would be selling, to make sure that I comply with these laws and regulation. And remember, you are always to comply with the strict law. So in this case, since I'm applying or my products are selling in different regions, I need to make sure I know the laws and regulation of those different regions so that I don't end up violating any of them. Is there any question? Now, for the recommendations, so there are some recommendations that you need to meet up to adhere to the standard, okay? So the recommendations are what can also help us. So one of the recommendations is that you should try to stay informed, okay? So stay informed. So, the member or a candidate or the employee should actually come up and establish a procedure for regular updates. So maybe you are working in an organization. That example that we gave, if the firm you are working with, probably if they have a very good procedure, by the time the rules and regulation changed, since the firm is involved in trading, you will notice that they will update all the staff members that rules and regulation has also changed since this is the business they are involved in. So you are actually encouraged to, have a procedure for updating your rules and regulation and all those kind of things. Then again, you are to review your procedures. So any procedures that you have, make sure you also review them to make sure that they reflect current laws and then provide adequate guidance. Then you are to maintain current files. Okay, so make sure that the files you have are easily accessible so that if I want to know the current updates on laws and regulation, I can easily go to those files to get information. Then the other one is understanding the distributional area laws and regulations. So these are for people involved in cross-transactional trades and investment products. So if you are going to be selling your products in other regions different from where they are originated, you have to understand the laws of those countries and regions where the products are developed, and also where the products are to be distributed to clients. We also have a recommendation on seeking legal counsel. Okay, so if you notice that you don't really know about what the law says about a particular matter, or you notice that a fellow employee in your organization is violating the law and regulation, you can actually go and seek advice from your legal personnel or your legal counsel. Okay. Yeah, so if you notice that you are not sure how the law applies or somebody is violating them, you can go and seek legal counsel. Then disassociating, so you try to document the violation and you urge the firm to stop the perpetrators or cease the conduct. Then you may actually need to resign to disassociate if that becomes the case. Then we have firm policies and procedures. So you are to encourage your firm to consider the following policies and procedures. So encourage them to have their code of ethics. Okay. Also encourage them to provide information on laws and regulations, and also encourage them to establish reporting rules and regulation. Okay, so this is actually the what do they call it? The last part on the what did we call the knowledge of the law. So, like we said earlier on, the knowledge of the law, the professionalism has 4. So what we just did now is that we are done with the knowledge of the law. So we still have about 3 more to go on this particular standard. Okay, so this is how we are going to, we call each of them, we'll talk about the things that you are to do and you are not to do, and then we'll talk about the recommendation. So we have to run across it with all the others like that. I hope we are together.
Yeah, we're getting it.